Listen, we'll get to some of the big topics of the day in relation to government policy. Can I ask for your reaction to the comments of Sir Jim Ratcliffe? Was it an example of wrong language but right message?
Look, I think, to be fair, I think he's entitled to say what he thinks he wants to say, but I think he was wrong, frankly. I think we ought to be proud of the people who've come to this country to help the country with such as healthcare, as an example. If we didn't have healthcare workers coming in, frankly, we wouldn't have people being looked after. That's the reality, in my view.
Well, I think we can all agree that many immigrants make a huge contribution to this country. But did he have a point that given the state of the national debt, the country's finances, Carl, that if you have too many low-skilled immigrants coming into the country, it's a net cost to the taxpayer?
Well, I think there's got to be a balance. And frankly, the Labour government are doing everything we can to stop illegal immigration, people coming in on dinghies across the channel. But frankly, we're not doing enough fast enough. That's the reality, and that's why people are getting cheesed off with us, I think.
I mean, is scrapping the Rwanda plan an example of doing everything you can to stop illegal immigration, given it was the only deterrent we had, Mr. Turner?
Well, the Rwanda plan was incredibly expensive, and I think, what was it, 2 people went back to Rwanda with 5,000 quid in the pockets. I mean, it was hardly a deterrent. It was more of an incentive.
What would you say to the Irish Taoiseach who at the time complained about the Rwanda plan before it even began because so many migrants were not hitting the UK and heading over to the Republic?
I didn't know that's what the Irish Taoiseach was saying, frankly.
Well, indeed, and I will say that Rishi Sunak was very happy to trumpet that at the time. Can I ask you, Carl, about this intervention from the former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner in regard to pubs? She and Andy Burnham have joined forces to effectively suggest that hospitality venues like pubs should be spared the worst excesses of VAT. Do you share that view?
I've not seen the detail, Mark, if I'm honest with you. I'm in Liverpool all-day hospital with my little girl who's had major surgery, so I've not been on top of it yesterday.
Oh, listen, we wish her well, and we've got prayers for a speedy recovery for your daughter.
He's very kind, but I think the reality is, if you speak to most publicans, they say that what the government are proposing is not quite enough. That's the truth. 15% off what was promised is hardly enough to cut the mustard, and people are worried. If you're a Republican, frankly, you are concerned about your business.
Well, indeed. So Angela Rayner and Andy Burnham, Carl, have called for more tax support for pubs in a fresh challenge to Sir Keir Starmer's authority. Now, they've suggested the PM should cut VAT to ease pressure on struggling businesses, a policy I suspect you would support. Out of which departmental budget would you pay for that support?
Well, I don't know. I've not said I agree with it. I would have to look at the detail and find out. I would probably, instead of saying something publicly about it, I'd probably speak to Rachel Reeves and the PM rather than going off publicly.
But, I mean, in principle, do you think hospitality venues need support, given that they're a big part of the economy, they're part of the social fabric, they're a focal point for our communities, and they are a big employer of young people? Surely it's a no-brainer on Talk Breakfast at 7:16 to go, yes, I would support hospitality.
Well, I do support hospitality, and what I say is that my local boozer in the village where I live in Hull is the community hub. Frankly, it's somewhere where people often go to have a pint and socialise. The reality is people are at home on their own a lot of the time. If they're single and getting on a bit, they want to be going out and doing something, and it's too expensive, actually. It's far too expensive.
So you would, in principle, back a VAT cut for pubs?
I'd have to look at the detail of it,
well,
mate.
What is the point of your warm words about old people having a pint at lunchtime if you can't back it up with a policy that would actually help these venues?
Because I'm not prepared to back Burnham or Rayner's policy without having a look at it and speaking to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. That's the reason. But do I, in principle, support more support for pubs? Absolutely, categorically, yes, I do.
Well, what would that support look like, Carl?
Well, I'm not the Chancellor, Mark. Bless your cotton socks. I know you'd like me to get me out there, but
you could suggest, for example, that pubs should pay less VAT so they can stay open, and that could come out of a different departmental budget. Perhaps the Department for Education or the NHS could live better within its means, and that could go to our landlords.
Well, you could suggest that, Mark. I'm not prepared to suggest that. I'm prepared to work with the Chancellor of the Exchequer to find out what she can do, if anything, to support pubs. I'm happy to support her if she comes up with something. I think she needs to look.
What do you make of those statistics that 7 or 8 pubs are closing every single week?
I think it's devastating, but I think 5,000 boozers closed under the Tories, far too many. I think what we really need to do is get together and work on a plan to save the boozer, because actually it's an important community hub.
Would you acknowledge that the reason why the pub closures have accelerated is the national insurance tax raid, the red tape surrounding workers' rights, and the increase in the minimum wage?
I'm very pleased about the support for workers. I think the government should be proud about the fact that for a first time for a very long time, people who go and work for a living, get up in the morning and go to graft, are being supported by a government that was on their side.
Well, it's bad news for pubs, isn't it? Because it makes it harder for them to hire people in a casual basis, such as 0 hours.
There might be other mitigations that can be put in, but in relation to workers' rights, I'm a big fan of workers' rights. I'm a Labour MP.
I mean, the pub landlords are not. So, I mean, you keep saying that you support the pubs, but all of the policies I've outlined are hurting the pubs, and you won't tell me how we're going to support the pubs financially.
I do think the national insurance increase was a mistake, personally.
Aha.
Said it at the time.
Bingo.
I said it at the time. I think in relation to not-for-profits, well, you've not cross-examined me into some concession, Mark. Don't congratulate.
No, I think it is. I think you've got one part of the jigsaw puzzle that explains why 8 pubs a week are closing.
Don't get yourself all excited about having achieved a sort of a
this is the gotcha. This is the Dolan gotcha. You've been gotcha.
It's not a gotcha.
I've taken you down, Carl.
Well, the reality is, look, I've always been concerned about not-for-profits and charities paying NI. I think there was a very clear indication to local authorities who've been savaged for years by the Tories, didn't have to pay, but the not-for-profits are under the cosh as a result of NI. And that is preventing them from using the resource to help communities. I think that was a problem.
Most definitely, and I agree with you. There you go, we found some common ground. Angela Rayner, she's much better at politics than Keir Starmer. She should be Prime Minister, shouldn't she, Carl?
Look, we've got a Prime Minister, we've got a leader of the Labour Party.
Haven't we just?
We've got a leader of the Labour Party who happens to be the PM. You know, the electorate put us into power in July 2024 with a fairly strong mandate. I mean, what do you want him to do? Pack his bags and leave just because a few people are saying he's not very good?
Don't give me ideas. I think that Mr. Blobby would do a better job than the Prime Minister at the moment, Carl, given the fact that we're now anticipating the slowest growth in 100 years. Inflation is sticky, almost double the Bank of England's target, and we've seen the return of the old enemy, unemployment, a bit ironic from the party of working people who now, it turns out, aren't in work.
Well, the truth is, I mean, the first 18 months have been a bit difficult. We've made a few mistakes. I think the Prime Minister has over-relied on advice, which hasn't been very good advice.
Yes.
I think what we need to do now is get a grip of the stuff we're planning, the stuff that was in the manifesto. Don't take Labour MPs by surprise. Crack on and do the stuff we promised, and let's see what the country make of it in 3 years from now.
There are challenges. If Sir Keir Starmer were to step down, Carl, let's just imagine a scenario where he's no longer Prime Minister. Do you think Angela Rayner would be the preferred candidate, and could she fix those problems that maybe have happened under Starmer's leadership?
I think Starmer can fix the problems by not over-relying on advice, which I think was poor. I mean, look, we've got people coming out now, Mark. If you want to talk about something which is a serious thing, and it's happening, you've got people like Lisa and Andy coming out and speaking about the bullying that her colleagues had under Max Sweeney. That's an important thing that the Prime Minister needs to fix. Labour MPs are briefed against, if in fact they have the audacity to speak against policy. It happened to me. I don't like the idea of jury curtailment. I think it's a bad idea. I don't think it's workable. I think we should scrap the idea completely. But if you say that as a Labour MP, they start to brief against you. Those are the things that Keir Starmer as Prime Minister can fix, and that's what I want him to do.
Carl, before we let you go, thoroughly enjoyed your company this morning. You're a man of common sense and ideological consistency. What do you make of this headline in the Daily Mail? Labour opens door to trans children in primary schools. It's the idea that little Johnny can become little Joanna at the age of 5 or 6. Surely that's not appropriate for such a young child in a setting that's supposed to be safe.
If the headline is right, I think it's absolutely stark, raving balmy.
There you go. A straight answer to a straight question. How rare from a politician.
You know, I just would love to spend my pre-Valentine's Day with Mark Dolan, obviously, talking about President Trump. Could President Trump bankrupt the BBC? I mean, if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be President Trump.
Most definitely. Well, the BBC, the corporation, has failed in its efforts to get this lawsuit delayed. So therefore, a major headache for them and a potentially massive bill.
It's going to be unreal. And Donald Trump has done this here in the States with the ABC station when George Stephanopoulos said on air that Trump did something that he did not do, or actually in court was found to be innocent of, as well as CBS. I mean, it really feels like CBS completely restructured based on that Trump win. They brought in an entirely new team. It's the anti-woke channel, and they're going through a lot of struggles there. So we know Trump has a lot of power in this space.
Most definitely. Is this story making headlines in the United States?
You know, honestly, Mark, all we're talking about is Savannah Guthrie's mother being missing, to the point of me wanting to pull my hair out. I'm like, have you guys seen the Epstein files?
Well, indeed. Now, this lady, Savannah Guthrie, is a TV host, and quite shockingly, her elderly mother appears to have been kidnapped. And so that is the equivalent of, I don't know, Eamon Holmes's mum being snatched or something. So it is a shocking story. Is there any hope that she'll be returned home anytime soon, this poor lady?
Can you believe it's been almost 2 weeks since she went missing? They found a glove this week that they believe belonged to the suspect, and they also were able to collect some like Ring door cam footage, Nest door cam footage, I think it specifically was, that they had to hack into the cloud to get because the intruder stole the physical camera. So we got to look at the suspect, but he's got a mask on, he's got multiple layers of clothing on. I have no idea what's going to happen next. It's like watching a horror story in real time, especially with all these proof of life videos that Savannah and her siblings are posting on social media requesting proof of life for their mother. The kidnapper wants $6 million in Bitcoin.
Yikes. I mean, why has this TV host been targeted, do you think? Is she particularly rich or powerful?
I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on and repeat to you some of the stories that I'm seeing online. She interviewed a lot of the Epstein victims, Savannah Guthrie, and some of the people that are following the story online wonder if it's associated.
Now, Kinsey, with me in the studio, Benedict Spence. More bad headlines for the BBC. Not a good look that they're being sued by the leader of the free world, that their legal efforts to have this case delayed or dismissed have completely failed.
Yeah, I mean, just on the subject of that story right there, I find it curious that people are demanding a ransom in Bitcoin, given what's currently happening to the value of that. I mean, that's a high stakes ransom.
Well, I know. I mean, if I kidnap anyone,
perhaps Donald Trump would like us to pay him in Bitcoin as well.
Definitely. Well, I might
see the value change
because you're in such close proximity, Benedict. I might kidnap you.
Yes.
After the show, and I'm going to ask for either gold or silver.
I was going to say my weight in gold or silver. Yeah. Actually, no, that's a lot of money. Not more than I'm worth. The thing is, it's all very funny watching this BBC thing unfold, because we all know they are going to be sweating an awful lot, because obviously he means it. There's more than a little evidence to suggest that he may have quite a strong case. And we all love watching the BBC getting a bit of a kicking these days, because it's not exactly covering itself in glory. The problem is, who's going to end up paying for it? Because we can't think about the BBC in the abstract. It is funded by taxpayers. The BBC will not go bankrupt. It will even, let's say hypothetically, Trump took all of its money. It will be bailed out by the British government. Who does that mean ends up paying for it? That means us. We're going to end up paying for it. The license fee will go up. People will be prosecuted more than they currently are for not paying the license fee. And of course, people need to pay the license fee in order to watch any other kind of broadcast media. It's one of those things where, as much as we can all say, well, it's about time that it, got a bit of a bloody nose, ultimately it will end up hurting every consumer of media in this country if Donald Trump ends up succeeding, because it'll be paid for out of taxation. And it means that every other broadcaster will end up having to basically cough up a little bit of that, because in order for the license fee in order for people to consume that content, the license fee that goes to the BBC has to be paid. So it's hilarious, and at the same time, the joke is going to end up being on us.
Kinsey, the White House consider the BBC to be a mouthpiece for left-wing propaganda, don't they?
They do. I mean, you could look at the war in Gaza. I think that they would use that as an example there. But I mean, I look at the BBC and I think about the Princess Diana interview. I mean, Benedict's exactly right. A lot of us look at our watches and go, yeah, it's about time. But unfortunately, I agree with him that the only one that hurts is you. The only person whose pocket it's going to hurt is yours. So I won't cheer on Trump too hard, because I love both of you, and I don't want you to go bankrupt.
Well, no, that's very kind of you, and I appreciate that. What would happen if the BBC were landed with a $10 billion bill is they'd have to live within their means and stop paying woke sportscasters £1.4 million a year to read out football results, or woke radio presenters £1 million a year to spin records and say, isn't it sunny outside? Kinsey, regarding the BBC, you're so right in regard to Diana, because Diana was tricked into doing that Panorama interview, which proved to be devastating for the late princess.
Yes, and I don't know if you read the book Dianorama by Andy Webb, but he goes into the deceit, years of deceit, and the leadership and management in the BBC that covered up this story, and they knew exactly what had taken place, and they weren't going to allow Martin Bashir to be held accountable. It's unreal. It's unbelievable.
And that interview, it was the beginning of the end for Diana, wasn't it? And it's reading between the lines of what Prince William has said in the past. He's implied that the BBC have got blood on their hands, given that Diana's life took a shocking trajectory after that TV appearance.
Well, can you blame him? Martin Bashir goes to Diana and specifically says, with faked documents, with forged documents that he hired a graphic designer to make for him, that her security detail is spying on her. She's so paranoid and upset by this idea that the security guards are whispering things into her husband or her husband's ear, that she fires them, and that's why she was without any safety the night that she died.
Was Sir Jim Ratcliffe wrong to use the language of colonisation?
It's really interesting. That comes from a 14-minute interview he did with Sky News, I think a couple of days ago. And 13 minutes and 59 seconds of it, or perhaps 13 minutes and 50 seconds of it, doesn't involve the use of the word colonize. In fact, it's a brilliant interview in which he reveals how the United Kingdom has been deindustrialized and how Europe more broadly is incapable now of defending itself, medically treating itself, and producing food, because it has so got rid of the ability to create all those essential items which every country should have for its own national security, but essentially on the back of the drive towards net zero. That was the overarching discussion that he had with Sky News. And everyone's focused in on his use of the word colonized. The point he was making, which is absolutely valid, is that we've had far too much immigration into the United Kingdom of people who are not contributing to the economy. They're either unskilled, doing jobs which prevent productivity from improving or keep British workers out of jobs, or they're literally on benefits, neither of which are, helpful for the British economy. That's the point he was making. Everyone's focused on colonized. And I suppose, in a way, it was good that he used the word colonized to the extent that it got people to focus on what he was saying. The tragedy, though, is having focused on what he was saying and then nailing that word colonized, he then moved on to apologize for it. He should have held his ground. He should never have apologized for the use of that word. He got people's attention, and he rightly got people's attention.
And Ben, with the best will in the world, I think that Advance UK is going to be a very important voice within the political sphere, but I think we can all agree you're not going to win the general election.
I don't agree.
Well, go on. Well, that's it. Well, look, you know, you will be fielding candidates and you may have representation in the House, but I suspect an overall majority might be a little ambitious at this stage. Notwithstanding that, do you think that any future administration can reverse the damage that's been done from Britain's failed open borders experiments?
I absolutely think it can be reversed, and it can be virtually reversed on a sixpence if there was the political will to do it. There are some significant legislative changes we need to make in order to give us the ability to do what's required. But once you've got the ability to do it, you can just do it. You can remove, frankly, even now, you can remove benefits from all foreigners. There's nothing that obliges us to give foreigners benefits. There's no act of parliament that cannot be changed in order to reverse that. That would take 1.5 million people out of benefits. You can, instead of putting these migrants who enter the country illegally into four-star hotels, free NHS, free dental care, and all the rest of it, you can put them in camps, perfectly civilized camps, where their human rights are not abused, but in camps where they get the day minimal amount of assistance required in order to survive. In France, these migrants are getting they have spent on them about £5,000 a year per head. We're spending about £55,000 per illegal migrant per year. I mean, that is an absolutely staggering sum. It indicates why they're crossing the channel to the UK. These things can be done overnight. But of course, if we were prepared to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, reverse the Equalities Act, and take a more draconian approach to those in our own country who aren't working. Again, Ratcliffe, in the clip that you played, mentioned the 9 million people, I think it's about 8 or 9 million people in this country, who are on benefits. Those benefits need to be removed, and the tax burden needs to come down so that people are encouraged to get off benefits and back into the workplace. And that's a dramatic improvement for the economy, because if you take someone off benefits, say they're getting £10,000 a year on benefits, just for the sake of the mathematics, and you put them into work and they're now paying £5,000 per annum in tax, the Exchequer is £15,000 to £20,000 better off, roughly speaking. £10,000 to £15,000 coming off benefits and £5,000 in the Exchequer's pocket because of the tax that is now being paid. This country could have the direction of its travel changed dramatically overnight if there was the political will to do it. But we do not have the political will to do it. Shabana Mahmood made a very, very soft suggestion that the right to stay in this country, indefinite leave to remain, a concept which I find balmy, that just by the effluxion of time, you should be given the right to permanently stay in this country as if you're a British citizen. She's made the very soft suggestion that the time period should be doubled from 5 years to 10 years. And the Labour Party has come down on her like a ton of bricks. They do not have the political will to do even the smallest things that might improve this country's position.
Well, indeed, and it's been suggested that there are left-wing Labour MPs lobbying the Prime Minister to reverse even the small changes outlined by Shabana Mahmood. Did Sir Jim Ratcliffe say the true bit out loud?
Well, I think the problem is solely with that word colonised, because everything that he said, apart from that, is absolutely accurate. The fact is that both major parties are paying lip service to curbing immigration, only the Lib Dems are not. And why are they doing that when they've always, taken a much softer line? Well, the answer is because they know that the British public are utterly fed up and worried by the sheer levels of immigration that are now happening. So, of course, he was right to speak out. Of course, he was. Now, he himself has said, that one word, well, if it offended people, he didn't mean to, but he's doubled down on the substance of his remarks, and that's got to be right.
Anne, have you gone woke?
Me? Woke? No, I'm not remotely woke. Why do you think?
Well, because you're offering a hint of hesitation about the word colonisation. Now, I've just spoken to a young woman, an entrepreneur called Lubna Zaidi, who's the parent of foreign immigrants, and she said Britain has been colonised. She would draw your attention to parts of East London, parts of the West Midlands, where 95 or 98% of the population are ethnic. Many communities living a parallel existence, ghettoised societies that don't speak the language and sometimes practice their own laws. If that's not colonisation, I don't know what is.
No. What I am saying is, and this is just pure common sense, don't obscure the principal argument, which is what you've just said, you know, that there are parts of the country where people do now feel they're in the minority and they're a bit baffled by what's going on. All that is true. All I'm saying is, let's get so fixated on the word colonised that we worry about that instead of worrying about the issue.
Most definitely, and it's a bit rich, isn't it, for Sir Keir Starmer and Andy Burnham to attack Sir Jim Ratcliffe for pointing out not just the societal consequences of mass immigration, Anne, but the economic consequences too.
Oh, the economic consequences are and always have been huge. The social consequences are, if anything, greater, because you are trying to accommodate numbers that we simply cannot accommodate. That's why they're in hotels. That's why they're now talking about taking council houses when, you know, there are really huge demands for those. So the social problems are enormous as well. And Keir Starmer said he was going to stop the boats. Well, you know, record numbers are coming in and they're arriving almost daily. And what most of the public feel is that they're helpless with all of this. They're helpless, that no government is getting a grip of this. Well, reform will.
And it's interesting regarding Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Anne, because he's been attacked for being a billionaire tax exile. Well, I think it's all the more impressive given the fact that he, as a rich man, is insulated from the consequences of Britain's failed open border experiment. He's demonstrated that given he hasn't got skin in the game, he's quite the patriot. He doesn't need to create this drama, but he's done it for the right reasons.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, he is right to talk about it. And if, as you rightly say, he himself is not going to be adversely affected by it in any way. I mean, he's not going to live next to a hotel, which is full of migrants. He's not going to pay the enormous bills that the rest of us are paying.
Well, bless you, Anne. Bless you. Take your time.
No, it's okay. It's just the end of a winter cough.
It's going round.
Going round, yes. Stop distracting me about my cough and let me speak about the more important.
Well, you were getting onto a very good point, which is that I think that Jim Ratcliffe has demonstrated he's a patriot. He's got nothing to gain from his outspoken remarks other than a love of his country, Anne.
Well, I think that's right. You know, he has no personal reason to resent the levels of immigration. He's resenting it on the part of Britain, and that is right. And as I say, you know, both major parties are now talking, paying lip service to controlling immigration. None of them have got the sort of plans that Reform have got, and this is going to go on. I mean, this is the real thing to understand, Mark. This is going to go on for another 3 years.
Well, indeed, and the issue is that we've got a culture now, Anne, where people are punished and told to apologise for speaking the truth. That appears to be Sir Jim's great crime.
Well, I mean, absolutely, but we've had that attitude in this country for a very, very long time. There was a time when you could hardly even mention the word immigration without being accused of being right-wing and fascist and everything else. And I remember that time. You know, I lived through it. And it was so in the Blair years in Parliament. You know, if you mentioned immigration, well, you were demonstrating that you had no feelings and that you were an unworthy human being.
Yes.
At least we are now at the stage where we can discuss immigration, and what is even better is with the underlying assumption that it's gone much too far.
And Anne, let me get on to another topic whilst I've got you, because I think this will provoke a reaction on your part. Labour last night opened the door to primary school children changing their gender. Long-awaited trans guidance for schools finally arrived yesterday, having been watered down from previous Tory proposals, which were robust. What it means, Anne, in plain English, is that little Johnny, aged 5, 6 or 7 years of age, can go to school and come out little Joanna. Your reaction?
Well, I mean, they've tried to say that it should be very rare. In fact, they have said it should be very rare for a primary school child to transition. I would have preferred them to say it simply cannot happen at primary school level. I mean, the only real advance in this guidance, and I think it is a good advance, is that it now acknowledges the role of parents. I mean, before we had a situation where parents would find out, sometimes by accident, that their children were being known by a different name and different pronouns in schools. At least this has said parents must be involved, but this should just not be happening at all at primary school level. It is a nonsense.
And as a practicing Christian, what's your view of so-called gender ideology, the notion that you're assigned a gender at birth, that there are 100 genders, that some people are trapped in the wrong body?
First of all, you're not assigned a gender at birth. You're born a girl or a boy. You're actually born with one sex or the other. So talking about assigned suggests that somehow this is something artificial that can be just changed at will later on. Now, there's a very small number of people, and nobody would deny this, who do genuinely suffer from gender dysphoria, and sometimes they go through hugely painful medical procedures in order to give effect to that. But they are a very, very tiny minority. The overwhelming majority of people, the overwhelming majority of people are men or women, and that is it. And there is no choice in the matter.
I agree with you. And stay with me. Joan has called Talk Breakfast. Good morning, Joan.
Hello to both of you. I'm absolutely fed up of all this rubbish that's been instilled into our children. It's nothing but child abuse. Why don't they let children just have a childhood? No wonder that our teenagers are so stressed with anxiety and mental health problems. Children, I just can't understand why this policy is being fobbed off onto little ones. It's just not right. And as I say, I'm a Christian and I get fed up of it. But what also upsets me is the silence of the church.
Anne, your reaction to that? Do you think, for example, the Church of England and other faith leaders should take a stand against so-called gender ideology?
Well, I think they certainly should. They won't. The Church of England in particular is terrified of offending anybody. And it wants to incorporate absolutely every last ideology into its own teaching. So they won't do that. But I think that your caller there really nailed it when she said, that childhood should be childhood. And they shouldn't be burdened with these sorts of considerations. I mean, I went through the whole of my primary education without hearing anything about sex, about different family structures, about anything like that. I went through my primary education having fun in the playground and learning in the classroom. And that is what it should be about.
Well, Anne, you are a libertarian, as I am myself. And when you're 18, good luck to you. If you're going to change your name from Bob to Bridget, I won't stand in your way. And you wouldn't be a true conservative if you took any other view than that. Live and let live. The issue we've got is young people who have a lot of crazy ideas. And when I was about 7, I wanted to be a car. Now, that didn't play out very well because I'm afraid that I'm not very powerful. I've got no torque, I've got no brakes and no windscreen. But the bottom line is that, Joan there invoking the idea of child abuse in relation to this ideology. Is that too strong?
No, I don't think it's too strong. I think when you actually start helping small children, and I mean small children, to transition, that is a form of child abuse because every sensible adult knows they cannot possibly be in a position at that stage to take what will be a major life-changing decision. They just cannot be. You wouldn't let them take charge, for example, of the family budget. You would say, no, you simply don't have the experience. You wouldn't let them decide what is dangerous and what is not when they're playing. You wouldn't let them decide entirely what they could eat or what they could not. But for some reason, we're actually saying to small children, oh, you can decide to change something as fundamental as whether you're a girl or a boy. And it is, yeah, child abuse is fine. I'll buy that.
Joan, last word on this, your final thoughts?
Well, as I said, I just can't understand these politicians. Why are they pushing all of this agenda? It's just absolutely ridiculous. And as for giving puberty blockers to children as young as 8, it's horrendous. It really is.
Why do you think they are pushing this ideology, Joan?
I just don't know. I don't know whether the woke lobby is so strong now that these politicians are so weak. They're terrified of them. But this has got to stop.
Joan, I completely agree with you. And this is very un-Christian, this ideology. I would argue it's against Western values as well. What do you think motivates this movement? And I take on board absolutely what you said, that there are people, Anne, who do have gender dysphoria, and there are examples throughout history of people, men that have dressed up as women and felt they were female, and we, you know, are very understanding towards those folk. But what is behind this seeming ideological drive, Anne, to basically dismantle the idea of two sexes?
Well, I think that very often behind these big drives, what you've actually got is a desire to undermine society as we know it. Now, Theresa May actually said in terms when the trans issue first started raising its head in this country, she actually said, oh, this is the most important thing. This was at a time when we were still trying to get Brexit. And people jump on the bandwagon and they want to be seen as modern, as inclusive, as tolerant. And they don't actually pause to think what this can mean in the longer term. Nobody paused to think that you could actually end up with a man in a woman's prison. I mean, it is such an unlikely scenario that people would have said, oh, rubbish, that won't happen. But of course, if you take that ideology forward, that is exactly what happens.
I spoke to Anne Widdecombe earlier. It's always a treat to have her on the show. And
absolutely.
She cast a little doubt about Sir Jim's choice of language, but she approved the message. Do you share Anne's view that his language was clumsy or inappropriate or intemperate?
Well, Mark, we always get into this debate about the words used. Nigel Farage has been taken to task for referring to an invasion. Margaret Thatcher, going back many years, was taken to task for referring to being swamped.
Yes.
I'm not sure it's important, really. And I know that Sir Jim got his figures muddled and his timings a bit wrong. But there's absolutely no doubt that we've had huge masses of immigration over the last 20 years. He referred to 12 million, or he picked up on the figure 12 million increase in population. What we have had since 2012, there have been 12 million people coming here long term. 12 million people. Net migration in that time was around 4.5 million people. These are massive figures, and it's happening so quickly. That's the issue. Of the, I don't know, roughly up to 11.5 million people born, non-UK born, who are in the UK now.
Yeah.
Something like 40% of them arrived in the last 10 years. Now, is this something serious that we should take seriously, that we should really be concerned about? And I would argue, absolutely. And to just look at the number of homes that are required for that number of people. In the year to mid-2024, there were 755 755,000 people added to our population in 1 year. That number of people require, you know, something like 3 million, over 300,000 homes. I'm getting my figures mixed up this
you're
morning.
absolutely right about that, Alp. The figures are mind-boggling. Housing, roads, GP appointments, school places, reservoirs, energy supply. The list is endless of the demands that our exploding population have on our crumbling resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the point. But he used the word colonizing. I mean, what does the word colonizing mean? Come to settle in a country and establish political control over the native people in the country. That's what it means. Well, actually, in parts of London, other parts of the country, this has happened. Tower Hamlets, for example, an area that I know something about, that is now controlled by a party called Aspire. 3 members of that party were actually in Bangladesh campaigning for election in that country. So, yeah, I mean, what do we mean by colonizing the country? No, clearly, if you look at our parliament, that is not so at the moment. But the speed and scale of migration is such that at some point we are going to get to the point where the people, the ethnic minorities are actually roughly 50-50. That's going to happen in, I don't know, early 2060s. But the 0 to 14 age group, that 50-50 point is going to arrive at something like 2041, 2042, depending on what happens to other factors.
15
like
years.
And deaths.
15 years from now.
15 years. That's 1 to 14. It's happening. That's the problem. No one, and even Jim is not saying stop immigration, all immigration.
No.
Maybe we should for a while. What he's saying is that the scale and speed is far too high and we can't afford it. It's costing us a fortune.
And why is it a problem if Indigenous Brits become outnumbered in their own country? Can you outline why that's an issue, Alp?
Well, you've just pointed to it in their own country. Look, when I arrived as a youngster, an 8-year-old in the mid-50s, my school, I was the only child that didn't speak English. I was the only child that was foreigner. If you go to the same school now, just about all the children in the particular school that I attended are either first or second generation migrants. I mean, that's just batty. If you go to, I don't know, Japan or any other country, Nigeria, in the country that I worked in, I mean, people were proud to be part of their nation. They were part of a history. They were part of a heritage that the whole nation was founded on. If we are gradually going to import people who are going to be here, I don't know, who having arrived recently at a short period of time, and they're in the majority, that is no longer the country that they have originally joined.
It's not Britain anymore, is it? Alp, stay with us if you can. Georgina has called Talk Breakfast. Good morning, Georgina. Regarding Sir Jim Ratcliffe's remarks, was it a case of wrong words, right message?
Well, I've never met Jim Ratcliffe personally, so I'm in no way qualified to cast aspersions on his character. But as far as I'm concerned, Jim Ratcliffe was absolutely right. And I think he was very tactful with his statement, and he should not have been asked by anyone, especially Keir Starmer, to apologise for telling the truth. As far as I'm concerned, when you have fighting-age men coming over in boats in their droves without their families, this is not a colonisation. This is an invasion, Mark, and I do not recognise our capital city any more as it resembles a foreign land as far as I'm concerned. This is yet another appeasement for the Muslim constituencies by Keir Starmer. That's what I think. And, you know, everyone's saying, oh, well, Jim Ratcliffe shouldn't have an opinion because he lives in Monaco. Well, you know, Jim Ratcliffe lived here for a long time, and he's paid more taxes in this country than you can shake a stick at. He's a self-made man, and I say all power to him. The truth has always been the enemy of the socialist, Mark, and Starmer has proven this point beautifully time and again. Keir Starmer's DEI, his cultural cohesion experiment, has been the biggest division mechanism that this country's ever seen. Britain has most definitely been colonised, and 75% of the colonists are on benefits. The majority contribute nothing to our economy. They are economic drains that increase with each passing day. We need to give the government less power over our population, not more, because as far as I can see, they're not working on our behalf or in our country's best interest. And we are in no financial position to be benevolent to migrants that are coming or into our country. There's little wonder that we have no economic growth when the working classes, which is something that Keir Starmer knows nothing about and can't even define what a working class person is, go out to work to pay their taxes to keep these colonists and migrants in a manner that since they've been in the UK, they've become accustomed to, and allowing the influx of migrants since the Blair era has changed the very fabric of our nation. The majority of these migrants do not want to assimilate, Mark. They don't want to integrate into our culture, and a lot of them do not wish to learn the King's English. They want us to assimilate into their culture and their religion, and this is not acceptable to any patriotic British subject. Diversity, as far as I'm concerned, has proven not to be our strength. In fact, it's the Achilles heel of our society, and the sooner that this government realise that, the better we'll all be for it.
Georgina, thank you for a very powerful call. Do call me again soon. Al Mehmet, is diversity our strength?
It's our weakness, I believe. Look, last year, Sir Keir Starmer, he referred to our becoming an island of strangers. Now, did he apologise? I don't recall any apology from him. There was an indirect withdrawal of the comment, and only because it had echoes of something that Enoch Powell had said. But what he was saying is really not very different to what Sir Jim Ratcliffe has been saying.
And it was written, that line, Island of Strangers Out, was written by Morgan McSweeney, who's just been fired from the government.
Well, he's
probably because he spoke the truth
from the government.
He's retired. Yeah, exactly.
No, but that is the point. The fact is that immigration, uncontrolled migration, mass immigration, is really changing our society and changing it rapidly. That's something that we should be concerned about, because not only is it changing it, but it's costing us an absolute fortune as well. So Jim Ratcliffe was really right to draw attention to this issue. And I know that there's been a lot of commentators and a lot of the media, not here and certain other channels, who have taken him to task. Oh, the figures were wrong. But this is what happens, that something blows up and then gradually people forget people in the media in particular forget the majority of people actually go along with what is being said. And they did when Sir Keir Starmer mentioned it. They've gone along with what Nigel Farage has been saying. They go along with what Georgina has said this morning, even though she may have got her figures a little wrong. But that's not the issue. It's the state of the country, the way that immigration is really continuing uncontrolled and changing our society.
Sir Jim Ratcliffe race route continues as Gary Lineker attacks the Manchester United co-owner in an episode of his latest podcast, which is called, what is it called? The Rest is Football. Take a listen to being attacked by Gary.
Right, they're generally the billionaires. They often seek to divide us. You know, I watched it, and I mean the hypocrisy. Really, the guy's a migrant himself, an economic migrant. He lives in Monaco. I mean, you can have a gripe all you like, but at least be here and be paying tax and contributing to our society. And I would say a lot of the immigrants, the migrants that do come in, contribute enormously, and facts show you that.
Facts show you that. So this is old Gary Lineker, who's concerned that Sir Jim Ratcliffe doesn't pay his taxes. Is this the same Gary Lineker that sued HM Revenue and Customs so that he could avoid paying £4.5 million in tax? Is that the same Gary Lineker? Asking for a friend. Let's get reaction live in the studio. Steve N. Allen, broadcaster and comedian, and down the line, retired Scotland Yard detective, Chief Inspector Mike Neville. Mike, let me start with you. Your reaction to this intervention from Gary Lineker. Has he got a point?
Well, we know Lineker's left-wing views, don't we? And when he talks about contribution, we also know the stats now that too many economic migrants actually cost the country a small fortune. Now, Sir Jim Ratcliffe said, "Oh, I'm sorry about the language and the like," but I think he's spoken up for a lot of people. A lot of people are concerned about mass immigration. We've had more immigration in this between 2000 and now than there was in 1,000 years before that. And people can see areas changing before their very eyes. You only have to come with me to Whitechapel tonight. Come with me to Spark Hill, places in Stoke, in Bolton. They're not multicultural at all. They're fully taken over. And so they're just not English in any way. People do not speak English there. And whoever thought this was a good idea? Yes, it's right that we can bring in doctors and engineers and wonderful people who are absolutely qualified. But that's not happening at the moment. And what people see is people come here, they don't integrate, they form their own little communities. And rather than multiculturalism, we have monocultures in areas, and it is not right. And people are speaking out now, and thank you to Talk and stations like that we can say this isn't right. We welcome people here. I've got a multicultural family myself. But the facts are we cannot carry on in the way it's going, and people have to say so.
Stephen Allen, do you think that Gary Lineker has a point about Sir Jim Ratcliffe and double standards?
No, because I'd love to know what Gary Lineker's point of view is, but we didn't actually hear it. All we heard is a reason why Jim Ratcliffe shouldn't be allowed to say a thing. Oh, you don't even pay tax. Well, argue whether his point is right or not. Even if you should, in theory, ideally live here and pay tax, get down to talking about whether he's right or not. You might not like the word colonised. We can debate whether you think the definition of the word colonised fits here, but the point of the actual, if you watch the full interview, it wasn't just that word, was it? It was making a point about numbers, about whether a society is coping with the numbers. So he wasn't saying zero migration, which some people have that point of view, but you don't have to think that to want to have a debate about what Jim Ratcliffe said. What I don't like is the pushback against it is, and I've seen this loads online, is you're not allowed to say that. You're not having a discussion if the 2 points of view are, I think this thing, you're not allowed to say that. Tell him why he's wrong. And he makes the point, Lineker in that clip made the point saying that effectively some migrants contribute. Yeah, because that's part of the debate and you're allowed to say that. So you also are allowed to say that the numbers might need looking at. This per capita concept, which now I never thought the concept of dividing one number by another would be a polarising political point of view. If you're on the left, all of a sudden you find it racist to even think about dividing a number by how many people contribute
Well, can you explain the difference between economic growth per capita and per regular national GDP and then per head? What is the difference?
Because it's really easy to get GDP up, the gross domestic product, just by having more people. Do you know what? I even did a voiceover about this for a documentary thing in Canada, because they went through exactly the same thing. That if you want to get GDP up, it is really easy. You cheat the numbers. You get more people coming in who contribute some, and that adds to that number.
Because they arrive and they go shopping and they become consumers.
Yeah. But if you try and work out per person, so if you're working like an average amount, that's just dividing one number by another. Shouldn't have been tricky. It's not even GCSE maths, and yet now it's considered like politically a thing of the right, some sort of dog whistle move to try and work out if per person you're doing better. And that's how you'd work out productivity. And yet for some reason they find it a thing that you're not allowed to do. And this is what bothers me. Debate should be about debating the issue, right at the top of the pyramid there. What's the thing you're saying, do I agree or disagree? Rather than, oh, you used a word that I think could be seen as offensive, so you shouldn't be allowed to talk.
And economic growth has been sort of slowly, anemically growing for the last few years. But per head, per viewer and listener to this show, we're getting poorer. It's going down.
Yeah.
And that should be the real figure. Mike, do you think that parts of Britain have been colonised? Was Sir Jim Ratcliffe wrong to back away from that language?
I think they have, yes. And if you look at what gets me with white liberals, if you look at places like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, you have them standing up and saying, look, these lands, they originally belonged to these Native Americans.
Stolen land. No one's illegal on stolen land, Mike.
Yeah, so they're saying it's stolen land all the time. So if you went to Spark Hill in Birmingham, does somebody stand up and say, look, we've got to acknowledge that this land belonged to these sort of white Christian Brummies in times past? So you've got to acknowledge, it cannot carry on this. It's the numbers, I think, that's firstly. But it's the concentration of numbers that people go to one place and then they just fit into their own little communities, and there's absolutely no integration at all. As I say, towns like Bolton, where I'm from, there are two halves to the town. One is white with some black people, some Jewish, Hindus, some Chinese, and then the other bit of the town is Muslim. And the two sides very rarely meet. You have schools where the entire school class is Muslims. That can't be right. How do you integrate into a country if it's like that? People are free to have whatever religion they like, but the thing is, we need to mix together. We need to work and play together to be a society, but otherwise society fractures.
And you're right to say that what's happened is that parts of the country have become a monoculture, and one which is alien to the host culture of the United Kingdom. And I think that's indisputable, Mike. Is the problem with the word colonised that it implies a plan, some kind of territorial objective, and that might be a bit far of the mark?
These are semantics, aren't they? All the time the left will dive into a word, attack, and as your other guest says, what the basic premise is you're not allowed to talk about it. Shut your mouth, keep quiet. We have a plan. The left have a plan, and they're going to drive that forward whatever the cost, and they'll ruin people, they'll attack people, they'll do everything in their power. That you've got, what I admire about the left is their utter commitment. They're crazy. You know, it's like, as an example, this woman taking kids to taking Valentines cards to a camp full of 500 men. That's how determined these people are. You know, she's prepared to put her own kids at risk for her own ridiculous ideology. That's how wicked they are, and that's what we've got to guard against.
Indeed. Can you tell me what you make of that as a former police officer, a former Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector, just in terms of safeguarding that children are drawing and creating Valentine's cards which will be presented by those children to undocumented men? Can you just give me your sort of policing overview of that?
Well, the first thing I would consider is that many of these men come from countries where you can marry a girl at age 7. So what is the message that's being sent out to these men that people with love hearts and the like are coming to them? Many of them will already consider that the West is decadent and evil. We know that the views from the grooming gangs all over the north of England and as far down as Oxford and places like that. So I would be saying to this councillor, I've got real issues about you taking your children there, and I will be considering reporting this matter to the social services, because you may well be putting those children at risk.
What do you think about this, Steve and Alan? Is this woman not trying to say, look, we're all human beings, and she's sharing a positive message of love? After all, you can't say that all of these men are terrorists or murderers in waiting.
There must be a way of getting that point across without trying to get your kids to chat up grown men, grandkids. I mean, look, I know this happens with politicians. John Gummer got his kids to eat burgers when mad cow disease was in the burgers. So politicians are always willing to use their family for political gain, but it is sickening, isn't it? Like, this is not the message that you need to send. You can say, look, these people. You can have the debate. You can be right or wrong about wanting migrants and refugees to come to the UK, but I don't think you solve anything by saying, you know, these people who have a reputation, rightly or wrongly, for, you know, some of them found guilty of sexually assaulting 13-year-olds. Let's get kids to write them Valentines cards is the wrong thing. Plus, also, wasn't St. Valentine's, I guess, a Christian saint or something? So this woman's oppressing all of these people with her Christian values.
Would it be too strong, Mike, to say that this woman is pimping her grandchildren in order to virtue signal and to politicise a very delicate situation?
Well, I think I wouldn't use that. It's not a word I would use myself, but I think she's putting them at risk. She's putting them at risk with men who we don't... Like you say, some of these men may be lovely. They might be decent chaps, but some of them, as we've seen with the crimes that people have been convicted of just this week in Warwickshire, an Afghani convicted of abduction and rape. We know that Afghanis are 20 times more likely to be involved in sexual offences than a native-born Briton. And so why I wouldn't take my grandchildren there for all those common sense reasons. But as I've said, their ideology trumps everything. And so she's prepared to do this, and it just shows how wicked they are.
And Mike, as you say, it's one of my favourite catchphrases of yours, the left, they never take a day off.
They never sleep. They never sleep. We'll have a rest from our activities. These people, they never sleep. They're absolutely committed to their ideology.
That's it. That is the catchphrase. I'm going to get a T-shirt, they never sleep. And I'm going to send you royalties for that, Mike, because it's a massive story. Mike, can I get your views on another developing story, which is the news that Rupert Lowe has launched a new political party. He's going to field candidates the length and breadth of the country. Is the only real winner Keir Starmer?
Yeah, it's tragic, really, isn't it? The fallout from with Rupert Lowe and the reform, it was really sad, really, and the involvement of the police and stuff. I can see why he's angry and bitter. He often talks a lot of sense. He does a lot of work in Parliament. But my counsel to him would be, to do this, you're just splitting. Let the split be on the left. Let them all fight. Let the Greens, the Greens and Labour and Lib Debs, let them all fight amongst themselves, because the danger is with them, of course. They are good at joining together, voting tactically to defeat, as we saw in Wales, where the Reform candidate should have won. So you're doubling the danger there by splitting the right. A Tory vote now is the wasted vote, in my view. Don't create any more wasted votes on the sensible. This is not far right. This is just sensible right. The people, ordinary folk of this country, need a party to vote for. So let's all get together and pull on the same rope.
Although, Stephen Allen, there are some that argue that if Nigel Farage wins the next election, he will let people down, because what he'll do is he'll just be another example of the Uni Party. Some would draw attention to ex-Tories joining Reform UK. If the country really wants proper change, the argument goes, you better vote for Rupert Lowe. And that is the view of the world's richest man, Elon Musk.
We've been saying that for the last few weeks, whenever they've been doing this weird phase of importing people who lost the last election. Not quite sure why who's going to help us win the next one. Let's look at all these ones who lost the last one. Let's go for them. Because that was the angle that Reform had, the freshness, we don't have 14 years of failure that gets brought up in all the arguments. And their weakness was a lack of provable ability. But then they've got the local councils, and that would have been, I thought that was the strategy. Get yourself at the local level, do well there, not increase council tax. I know some of them are doing, so that's not going to help. But you could have shown your ability on the smaller level and say, let us extrapolate this up. Whereas what they're doing is saying, oh, we've got experience because we've got these bunch of failures in. So yeah, I think they're effectively importing in uniparty, although that concept of uniparty, some people are now thinking that there's this one slice of politics on the right and everything else would be uniparty. Well, fair enough, you might think that, but then the uniparty is always going to win. They will always have the numbers if that's how you view it.
Most definitely. How do you see this one being resolved, Mike? Do you think that Rupert Lowe will somehow form a coalition with Nigel Farage? How could it play out at the next election?
Well, we've seen that Rupert Lowe has voted with reform in the Commons, so he's a pragmatic man. He's a very clever man. I think he's a very successful businessman, and up to a point, and he really does have a real reason to feel angry about certain, just all the things that was done to him. But I do think he's a pragmatic man, and he's determined that the country shall improve. So let's hope they can work together.
Let's be clear. The radical left of this country, who ought to be just as feared as the so-called far right with which Sir Keir Starmer is obsessed, the radical left are not just wrong about everything and deluded and mad. They are dangerous. For example, the Green Party councillor who's taking her small grandchildren to a migrant camp in order to deliver a Valentine's Day card to each and every undocumented male accommodated on that facility. Anne Cross announced at a rather heated public meeting that she plans to take her grandchildren to the controversial Crowborough training camp base today, which is accommodating, you heard me right, upwards of 500 undocumented males. Now, the East Sussex councillor has chosen to perform this stunt because she said that she'd like to encourage locals to be more open-minded about their new migrant neighbours and to hear the stories of those in the camp. What the hell is this? Their stories in the camp. Is this Jack a bloody Nori? She said there's nothing like getting to know people and hearing their stories in order to dispel fear. She said, my grandchildren and I have painted some wonderful Valentines cards at the weekend, which we're going to be presenting to men in the Crowborough venue, this army training camp, as a welcome to the United Kingdom. She went on to urge all representatives of the local community to stand with those who want to share the love. Where to start? Well, first of all, good luck hearing the life stories of these small boat migrants. I think you'll find, my dear, that they've chucked any documents that identify them into the sea as they crossed the channel. So hearing their stories is going to be tricky because they've covered up their life stories in order to claim asylum in the country. I think you'll find, my dear, that these gentlemen to whom you profess such love will be somewhat tight-lipped about their backgrounds and motivations for coming to the UK. Is it too difficult for someone like Anne Cross, who I'm assuming on paper is an intelligent person, is it too hard for her to understand that these people are by definition criminals, having paid gangsters to make that perilous crossing, and they've broken the law to enter the country illegally? Why do they get a welcome when they've broken the law to be here? Has she not heard the litany of accounts of innocent Brits harmed or even murdered by small boat migrants, like one specimen who's just been jailed for the kidnapping and rape of a 12-year-old girl in a park in Nuneaton? And what about another monster who murdered a woman that actually worked at the migrant hotel where he was being accommodated at taxpayers' expense? This guy, this monster, who the crazy councillor wants to give a Valentine cards to, he got 3 decades in jail for stabbing this poor woman 26 times in the face with a screwdriver, orphaning a young child. Now, of course, Channel migrants are not all a threat to the citizens of this country, but to deploy and weaponise children in a wild act of pathological suicide empathy, getting them to write Valentine's cards, which in any context, if written by a child for an adult stranger, well, all of it is completely inappropriate and wrong and tells you everything you need to know about how ideologically captured, misguided, dangerous and mad these woke progressives are. Any grandmother getting her grandkids to write love notes to fighting-age young men whose backgrounds we don't know is surely a case for social services. Those kids should be taken off her. They're not safe in her charge. I mean, as I tell you this, I just cannot believe that these words are coming out of my mouth. But then again, these are the same people who think we should bankrupt our economy and threaten our national security by destroying our energy supply in the pursuit of net zero. These are the same people who support Labour's brand new policy of letting children at primary school as young as the age of 4 change their gender in the classroom. Why should I be surprised at this Valentine's Day madness when these are the same people that demonise our great history, even though we arguably are the most benevolent nation in history, having delivered parliamentary democracy, the rule of law, free speech, the Industrial Revolution, a comprehensive justice system, William Shakespeare, the Beatles, and the ending of slavery? Why should I be surprised when these are the same people, the radical woke left, who see racism everywhere except when it's staring them in the mirror, with their enthusiasm for segregation and the judging of people based on their skin colour, not their character, in a sick inversion of Martin Luther King's dream of a colourblind society. Let me tell you, folks, that the anti-racists, with their white supremacy and their safe spaces for people of colour and black-only audiences at the theatre, are the real racists. The radical left aren't just mad, wrong, deluded and misguided. They are dangerous too. They are the actual enemy, because their crazy, deranged ideas must be battled, challenged and defeated. Otherwise, we don't have a Britain at all. The fight for common sense, for British values, for democracy is ongoing. These people don't take a day off. And let me tell you, it is mind-boggling to think that this woman, this Green Party councillor, is someone that has achieved power on a local level. On Valentine's Day, Cupid's arrow has been replaced by Stupid's arrow. It's enough to break your heart. Rupert Lowe has launched a brand new party of the right, and it's called Restore Britain. He's an intelligent guy. He's got many fans out there, including many watching to and listening to this show. But would a divided right hand 5 more years of power to Labour?
Yep. I mean, we've already got a divided right, and this is dividing the divided right. So mathematically, this is what the left has done for ages. Like, historically in this country, it's been true to say that the right fights the left and the left fights itself. It's this purity politics of, oh, you're not left enough, you're centre-right, which is effectively a Tory. Sorry, centre-left, which is effectively a Tory. There's parts of the left that will hate you for not being full-on right up to the brink of, like, oh, are you sure this communism thing's bad? If you're not one of those, then you're effectively a Tory.
And it's about ideological purity, isn't it?
And there's no way to win an election because of our system specifically. It's not a good way to win things anyway. What a stupid way to have an argument. If you're not as pure as me, you shouldn't be allowed to speak, is the point of view of some of the left. But when you've got a first-past-the-post system, annoyingly, that normal distribution kicks in, that Gaussian curve, my friend. It's all about that. You need a chunk of that middle, don't you? And the right have been focused on winning elections. What a great thing to do if you are in an election. As Corbyn said, we lost the election, but we won the argument. Oh, well done. It's a shame you weren't just doing an argument then, because you were taking part in an election, you fool.
Yeah.
But this is messing it up. Now, there is a chance that what this might do is move the right's slice of the Overton window and discuss the issues that people want to see discussed, because that seems to be the main schism between reform and reclaim. Also, let's talk about that, because not reclaim, reform, reuse, restore. There's a lot of these, recycle.
Repurpose.
Yeah, there's a lot of those going on. It does get confusing. And as much as that's the joke, that's part of what's getting on here. There's a mushiness to what's happening on the right now. Which party is saying which about what? And that's not going to help.
Most definitely. Well, it's when egos get in the way. And as you said, the left did it for decades. It happened under Michael Foot. It's possibly happening again for this new incumbent Labour government, where you're seeing the soft left, and then you've got the Corbynites, and then you've got the so-called blue Labour. And that's maybe why it's difficult for Sir Keir Starmer to govern. But successful administrations, at least electorally, the ones that have won multiple elections back-to-back, have been a broad coalition. Yeah. That would be the Thatcher years, where she accommodated the Tory-wets, those philanthropic aristocrats, alongside the incredibly right-wing sort of working-class tranche of the party, the Tebbitites.
Yep.
And similarly, New Labour was a coalition too. And it wasn't even a happy coalition, but it was held together with a single message from Tony Blair, which is you're better off in power than not.
Which is so true. They should have that as a tattoo, because they forget that, don't they? The idea of being, especially now with social media, being able to signal that virtue of look how pure my politics are, and thereby throwing away an election. There's no point looking really good but having no power to do anything. Even with power to do things, Starmer's finding out that it's not particularly possible to do some of the things if your backbenchers don't agree. And back in the Blair years, I mean, it was barely a Labour government, really. It was just kind of people were sick of the Tories, so they just rebranded a different Tories. And I'm not saying that as a slight. I think it's just an observation of where you were, if you the broad church, where you'd put the markers of the broad church politically. It was so far overlapping people in that chunk of centre-right.
Definitely.
That then, and that's the way to win. So look, I don't think Rupert Lowe's doing that. And I think this is going to cause a mathematical problem. You only need to worry about that in an election, though. And I think at this stage, moving where the discussion is can be useful. Although I was looking on their website and it lists the problems, no solutions. But maybe I'm being harsh because they've only just launched the darn thing.
Well, for those that don't know, can you tell us about The Life of Brian and why some of the characters from that film might be invoked when it comes to what's happening on the right?
The People's Front of Judea.
Yeah.
They've got nothing in common with the...
So for those that haven't seen the movie, why is this such an iconic scene and why is it so pertinent at the moment?
Well, it just shows that people would rather squabble with people with whom they effectively agree, other than on such a slice, and then they form such a hatred, such a visceral hatred, that they think the worst kind of person is the one who almost, like, Venn diagram-wise, overlaps. And that is probably what's happening here, isn't it?
Well, that's right. So John Cleese he's sat there in this amphitheatre in ancient Rome, and you've got he's at war with someone else sitting next to him because he represents the People's Front of Judea, and then his rival represents the Judean People's Front.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure was a satire on the left at that time.
Yes.
And now the right are doing it. They're doing it in America, where you see sort of Ben Shapiro in disagreement with Tucker Carlson over Israel. You've got Candace Owens, who's at war with almost everyone else on the right. It's not a happy. They're not happy campers.
But do you think in the old days that was because for some reason the left were obsessed with this ideology? Who could be the purist? Whereas now the right also stirs in a little bit of the environment that we're in. Like, if you want to make headlines, if you want to be successful on social media, you have to do something that seems emotionally led, the old, the lizard part of the brain. And that will lead you to finding the areas you disagree on rather than the areas of commonality, which is not good for elections, but is good for having a row politically. We're kind of to blame as well by like the media landscape would rather see two people thoroughly refuse to see the other person's point of view and shout for a 5-minute bit, which goes great on the internet, whereas actually the world needs people who can say, oh, I see what you say, but here's why I disagree with you.
Christina says, good morning, Mark. Rupert Lowe is a sad, bitter man, along with Ben Habib. Keir Starmer is desperate. All he's doing is telling the world he's running scared. Vote Reform UK. Starmer is a traitor. We need our independent. Brexit is we need our independence. Brexit is our lifeline. Thank you for that, Christina. Let's have a look. We've got so many messages coming in. Let me make sure and stay on top of these. Mark, I'm going to throw a hand grenade into this conversation, says Nick. Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe, two politicians for whom I used to have the utmost respect, have shown that they're no different to the others. Ultimately, their egos dictate their actions. And as neither man will ever be remotely adversely affected financially by a continuation of Starmer's socialist junta, they care not a jot about splitting the vote. Anyone who really wants change needs to ignore these two narcissists. Vicky in Bournemouth. Good morning, Mark. Rupert has formed his own party alongside Nigel, and it's sadly not going to be strong enough on the right to do what's necessary to save our country. Oh, Nigel is not going to be strong enough on the right to do what is necessary to save our country. We have a massive problem with radical Islam. Reform will not stand up to that. Nigel has said we can't win against Islam. That's admitting we've already lost. Rupert will fight, and I believe he is the man we've been waiting for. How about this from Sharon? Oh my gosh, do I give a damn about what Gordon Ramsay has to say? Hell no. He's just looking for publicity. Lisa in Northern Ireland. Good morning, Mark. Much as I admire Nigel Farage and what he's achieved, Rupert Lowe is a formidable man who really sticks to his principles. He's very effective at holding the civil servants to account on his select committee. It's a pleasure to watch them squirm under his questioning. He's the only public figure who keeps raising the issue of barbaric halal slaughter. That's Lisa in Northern Ireland. More front pages next. Is it time for the right to unite? It's 6:33. This is Talk Breakfast. Rupert Lowe has launched a political party, but is it a gift to Labour? Does it guarantee Keir Starmer another 5 years in power? Deborah says, good morning, Mark. I admire Rupert Lowe. However, I do have a concern. The established parties seem to be doing everything they can to work together tactically to stop reform. Unfortunately, this kind of coordinated voting could succeed. As a new party, can Rupert Lowe honestly say that he can overcome that level of tactical voting? Whether people like it or not, reform is rising. Deborah says, the last thing I want is for votes to be split at the very moment when there's finally a chance to remove the current government. If a general election were called in a year or two, or even sooner, having so many new parties and independents running could be catastrophic for those of us hoping for real change and a return to some form of normality. It frightens me, and I can't help feeling this is exactly what the left is waiting for. Split the vote and Labour gets back in. And Deborah concludes by saying, I truly wish him all the best, but I'm starting to think it may be time for me to consider leaving for my second home country. Good luck, says Deborah. Crumbs. Well, look, the feelings are coming in thick and fast. Tactical voting is going to be a big aspect of the next election, isn't it? Yeah. And parties of the left, Labour, SNP, Lib Dems and Greens, may work together in certain constituencies. They'll be helped if there are about 3 or 4 right-wing options on the ballot box.
Yes, it will definitely work. I mean, look what happened in France as well, when there was a chance that the far right would get in. So the other 2 of these 3 poles of the French political spectrum ganged up. Of course they would, though. It's very easy to when you don't benefit from this kind of tactical voting, you think it's terrible. But when your side, like, no one really cried when all the Brexit Party candidates stood down to let the Tories win. People were, I mean, retrospectively, you don't think it was a good idea. But you were thinking, OK, no, I see, you've got to get the opposite side out. So everyone tactically votes. But it will be so successful. Yeah, and with another party in the mix, it's all about just trimming off that extra couple of the cream off the top. You get another 5% off a vote, and all of a sudden you get knocked into 2nd or 3rd place with our system. Yeah. You've got to be realistic. The first past the post system is all about numbers. It's just that main gallop.
Most definitely. What do you make of this story? It's the topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch, Steve, and it's a Green Party councillor. She's a grandmother who's taking her children to an army training camp in Crowborough in East Sussex to hand Valentines cards created by those grandchildren to give them to undocumented men. This is not too popular among my viewers and listeners. What do you think of it?
Are we sure it's not April the 1st? Because it very much...
You have to wonder.
This is not even a good idea from their side, is it? You know what's happening in terms of the story is a lot of these men, these undocumented, but maybe they're just coming here to seek a new life, and the narrative is that they might be a threat to some of our younger women. So let's get kids to write them a Valentine's card. It hardly clears their record from any kind of dodginess with young'uns, does it? It feels like almost you're tainting them more. I trust people even less if they've received Valentine's cards from kids. They're the ones you should keep an eye on.
Yes, so if that's not a red flag, nothing is.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't even know whether it's legal for children to be instructed to write Valentine's cards for male strangers that they don't know, notwithstanding their legal status in the country.
So are you saying you don't think the kids came up with the idea on their own?
Who knew? Who knew?
None of this looks good. It just looks like she's come up with a really bad idea and has followed through on it.
This is the Green Party councillor who provoked a huge backlash by announcing that she'll be taking her grandchildren to deliver Valentine's Day cards to young male asylum seekers. Anne Cross announced at a febrile public meeting that she plans to take her grandkids to the controversial Crowborough training camp base today. The East Sussex County Councillor made the statement in an attempt to encourage locals to be more open-minded about their new migrant neighbours and to hear the stories of those in the camp. She said, there's nothing like getting to know people and hearing their stories in order to dispel fear. My grandchildren and I painted some Valentine's cards at the weekend, which we're going to be presenting to the men at Crowborough as a welcome. Well, the flip side of this, is she simply trying to make sure that we don't demonise these people you can't just say that everyone that's crossed the channel is a terrorist in waiting. So therefore, is she seeking to say, look, these are human beings, many of them fleeing suffering and persecution?
And if that's her goal, what she should do is what you just did. What a great way of phrasing it. And what you didn't do is get your kids to write a love message to these grown men. And look, if you want these people to not be stigmatised, don't have them walking around Crowborough holding a card that's got like a kid's drawing of a love heart on it. If anything's going to get you beaten up, it's that, isn't it? So it's such a bad idea. Yes, of course. Well, there's two things. She is trying to possibly have the debate about, not all of them are terrorists and your worries need to be talked about. But that's what the right's trying to say. That's what everyone should be saying. We should be talking about these issues, bring in infrastructure, bring in numbers, talk about all of these issues. You don't solve it by doing this headline grabbing, because that's what it is, isn't it? I mean, it's not like they particularly... Her concern isn't these poor men aren't going to get a Valentine's card this year, because there are loads of men not getting Valentine's cards this year. I've been married for long enough. I don't think I'm getting one, and she's not got her kids to write me one. So she's doing this to grab headlines.
She most definitely is, and it's virtue signalling on an epic scale, isn't it? And it's pretty... I would say, I think it's going to go down very badly with families that have been impacted by criminals who have actually, hurt their loved ones who should have not arrived on a dinghy. Pretty serious stuff. The weekend, Andrew's security officers may be questioned on women at the palace. Ex-Prince's Royal Protection Officer has contacted police about female visitors at Buckingham Palace, offering to help their inquiry into links with Epstein. The allegation that officers were the allegation is that officers were told not to record Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's guests in an official log. These Andrew headlines, they just keep on coming, don't they?
Yep. Do you know what? The Prince of Wales is absolutely right on this, isn't he? When he said, as soon as the Mateless interview happened, he was like, come on, we've got to get some distance. This is going to be a stain on the royal family. Yeah. He nailed that from a distance. How true this is. Yeah, you know what? It keeps coming. I don't think it's going to get better. And we've known this bit for a while, though. Even this is just about who were visiting him at home. But we also know, if there's one thing you know about a prince, someone in line to the throne, he always has close protection people with him, which means people knew. Don't tell me that they weren't aware of what was happening. If I went to some sort of dodgy island, I'd be going on my own and you might not know what happened. But if you turn up with security, there are effectively witnesses. Do you know what I mean? You are paid for witnesses. Some people know exactly what's been gotten up to through all of this, and I guess they signed some sort of thing. But come on, it's time to let them speak.
Well, that's right. His security personnel, other loved ones, Beatrice and Eugenie, it can't have escaped their attention that their father had a libidinous appetite.
Well, I don't know. That seems harsh. I think if anyone, there are two reasons why they might not be fully cognizant of all the details. If you're going to hide it from anyone, you hide it from your daughters. And also, if ever there's someone who will have a mental block for fear of needing extra therapy later in life, it would be the daughters, wouldn't it? I imagine they have mentally blocked off any info that they saw.
Do you have any sympathy for Beatrice and Eugenie?
Oh, yes. Of course you do. In general, I don't have loads of sympathy for the royals. I think you lucked out. You were born into a family that, for some reason, we as a nation still believe you're better than us. And we still do. We still have this system that is fundamentally one family's better than us. OK, there's some wrong-uns in there. That's what we're learning now. There are some that we don't particularly like, but we still have to pretend they are just innately better than us. But it's not the daughter's fault at all, is it? I imagine that. That's now kind of what they're going to be known for. They went through that short phase of being known for weird hats. And now they're known for dodgy dad. They'll be looking back on those fascinator years thinking, oh, those are the days.
You're quite right. Bring back the weird hats and the odd clipped accents. Has the case for Britain becoming a republic been emboldened by the Andrew scandal?
Yeah, do you know what? If the monarchy actually meant anything, and I hope I don't get beheaded for this, which actually you can't be these days, and that's another point of why it doesn't mean what it used to. Right? In the olden days, if you're a king, you could chop someone's head off, and also you'd be on the back of a horse. This is why our last monarch, she became the longest reigning monarch. As if that was impressive. Modern-day medicine and also not having to fight people with swords are the two reasons why monarchs these days really pack in the years in comparison to how they used to. But it doesn't really do anything, does it? I know in theory Charles can suddenly get rid of a government, but it's just never going to happen. It's all pretense. It is effectively Madame Tussauds.
So therefore you could only get cross about the idea of a monarchy if they had actual power, and they don't. Your argument is it's decorative and ceremonial. They're basically trinkets, national trinkets.
Yeah, and whatever they make the argument that they're kind of washing their face financially, you just about let them get away with it.
Although you are right about that, but I think more will come to light about what Andrew was up to. Andrew Lowney, the man whose book entitled was The Beginning of the End for Andrew, which came out at the end of last year, has told me on this programme that there's worse to come. And he said that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor should be in jail. If he has committed crimes that could lead to a jail term, does that not suggest that the existence of a monarchy makes it easier for someone to break the law and surely then undermines its very purpose?
Well, I'd agree with you if it weren't for the fact he's not the only name we're talking about from the Epstein files who may slightly have been accused of, and sure says that they're innocent of, sending information. I know there are two sides to this. We should always be remembering the victims of the sex side of this, but actually the thing that's going to be the crime is the information, the passing on information. That's the really worrying thing. That's the thing that really pulls the rug out from underneath the authority.
Things which are commercially sensitive or have national security implications.
Yeah, there's the crime that I think these people should very much be tried for early doors. But it's not just the royals, is what I'm saying. Andrew wasn't the only one, was he? We can all list another Prince of Darkness who might have some accusations coming his way.
More devastating headlines for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Front page of the Daily Mirror. Royal exclusive. A stain on the family. William's fury at Andrew over Epstein revelations. Prince William wanted his uncle Andrew banished over revelations about him and Jeffrey Epstein 6 years before he was finally exiled. Well, I would suggest that the Prince of Wales was on the right side of history and demonstrated keen judgment, so lacking from his grandmother Elizabeth and from his father Charles. Let's get reaction from Talk's royal correspondent Rupert Bell. Good morning, Rupert.
Good morning, Mark.
We know, don't we, that the Prince of Wales has a very different attitude towards the handling of this Andrew story compared to his father.
Yes, I think he's taken a pretty dim view of the antics of his uncle and probably wanted a firmer line, because he may have seen the fact that the problems that he was going to drag that Andrew his family into, and they're not going away. And actually, when you think about it, William himself now has got a bit of a problem with his Earthshot prize, because I think it is within the DP World Tour. The big boss of that company has been stood down because of his links with Jeffrey Epstein, and DP World Tour are one of the founding fathers of the Williams Earthshot Prize. So the web is just all over the place in terms of the royal family being entangled in bits of Epstein's fallout. But for Andrew, that is the biggest problem for the royal family, and they need somehow, and I keep saying to you, Mark, get on the front foot, but every time they seem to be blindsided with more revelations that make it very hard. And maybe police investigations do have to take place to see if Andrew has broken the law.
The tone from William and what we're hearing about his attitude towards his uncle, it's quite clear he's got no time for his uncle Andrew. Do you think that the king is closer to his brother, and has that made it harder for Charles to be so decisive in his handling of Andrew?
Well, I think the loyalty is that his brother, and probably at one stage, sort of believed his story. It's sort of elements of Keir Starmer believing Peter Mandelson and various other people, and took it on trust. But I think the reason why that they eventually stripped him of his title is because in the end, I think even the king realised, I'm not sure where this is going to end, and hence the reason why stripping him of his title as Prince Andrew and then sending him into exile and getting him out of Royal Lodge sort of almost under the cover of darkness may be suggesting that even the king's patience is being sorely tested. And that's why we saw those statements last week supporting the victims from both the king and queen and the Prince and Princess of Wales, after Prince Edward, when he was in the UAE, also was saying the victims, we need to be taking care of them. So the royal family have just tried to get onto the front foot a bit. But as we say, every time there's more argument. Has Andrew been passing on financial documents that might be at some stage confidential? It all seems to be a drip feed of problems for the royal family. And it is Andrew that is, by his association with Epstein, that is creating those problems.
And William is not king yet, Rupert, but he's a keen and effusive defender of the royal brand. He's the one that walked to church a few years ago and said, we are very much not a racist family, following the Harry and Meghan Oprah interview. And now he's stepping in again to protect the royal brand against all of these damaging headlines as a result of his uncle Andrew. This is a man that's fighting for the cause, and he knows that he's going at some point to inherit this mess himself when he takes to the throne.
Yes, and that is the problem. And he wants to make sure that he can reign in his way without all these distractions. And let's be honest, since the king has ascended to the throne, this has been the dominant story throughout, and has made it, as well as his cancer diagnosis, has made it very hard. And you just wonder, has the king got the energy? You know, this requires, you know, thought, determination to try and sort this out, yet he's got his own personal struggles, and you can understand that his distraction, and maybe it is hard for him to keep the eye on the ball and just to make sure that we get it right, because he's obviously having to deal with his own health issues, and he wants to be a proactive king, but given the circumstances, this is proving very difficult.
Has the king been too lenient with Andrew because of an unspoken promise to his late mother Elizabeth that he would take care of her once favourite son?
Well, this, I suppose, you know, loyalty, he very, you know, to his mother, and you know, all families might have similar circumstances. But for the king, this is no test of the sort of relationship with his brother, but there's constitutional issues here, and that's the difficulty for him, because this is a constitutional crisis. It is causing a problem for the royal family from a PR perspective, and people are understanding, well, what's the point of the royal family? It just looks like they're going to be covering up and not apologising, not doing enough to get a grip. But sometimes I just feel that the royal family, you know, what's going on in America, it seems to be a complicated political process with redactions and who says what and what's allowed to be put into the public domain, whereas the royal family do at all times seem to be the easy one that seems to be more and more revelations about, whereas in America, looking from the outside, obviously we're not there, look in, it does seem to me that it's harder to get stuff about the various Americans who are connected to Epstein into the public domain, whereas anything to do with Andrew seems to be fair game.
When William becomes king, he will handle these scandals very differently, won't he? There's a steel about William that perhaps his father doesn't have, and a detachment emotionally, Rupert.
I think that is the key point here. William wants to be his own man. He's made it very clear how he wants to operate within the royal household, what he sees as important. We've seen the Earshot Prize, which he's now got to deal with some fallout from that, but also the other issues that he gets involved in. He wants to be a very, I suppose, trying to be a modern monarch when it's his turn, and something that the country can come behind and see that there is a reason why we have a royal family. At the moment, there are people, you know, sort of saying, well, what is the point, when it seems to just be embroiled in more and more scandal? And that's not the purpose of the royal family. It is here to be a stabilising influence, as it were, which we saw from the Queen. Since she died, it does seem that from the King's perspective, it hasn't been an easy road that he's been travelling.
Whether it's women that have been reportedly, allegedly trafficked into Buckingham Palace, or the sharing of national security and commercially sensitive material, Rupert, is it conceivable in a wild scenario that Andrew could wind up in prison? Is it possible that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor could go to jail?
If he is found guilty in a court of law, then there is every chance. But we've got to get to that stage. And any investigation by the police to see if there's a case for him to answer, if he's passing on sensitive documents, that would be a prison sentence in any normal circumstances if found guilty. So for Andrew, I think it does behove the police to look at it for the protection in many ways of the royal family.
I mean, the situation now is it's almost, I think, getting slightly ridiculous. The sheer volume of the allegations and accusations against the former prince are now extraordinary. They are, without in any way wishing to undermine the seriousness of the accusations against Peter Mandelson, they're more serious. We have allegations, of course, that the Prince Andrew, the then Prince Andrew, when he was a trade envoy for this country in the noughties, was not only in effect, these are allegations, of course, which he denies, in effect selling secrets, British secrets, to Jeffrey Epstein, but now he stands accused of selling secrets to his banker friends, the Rowlands, David and his son Jonathan Rowland, plus Gordon Brown, no less, former Prime Minister, saying that Jeffrey Epstein flew 90 flights into Britain full of his various women that he was sex trafficking, and that Andrew was up to his neck in this, that some of these women went directly to Buckingham Palace and he had them spirited in for his own delectation, allegedly. Now, these accusations are extraordinary. They are much more serious than the allegations against Mandelson, serious though they are in themselves. And yet, here we are, a week on, still no announcement of an official police criminal investigation into the King's brother. That has to happen, doesn't it, very soon?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what I would say is I'm surprised it's taken so long, because some of these accusations have been in the press for 15 years. Many of these revelations, which are described as being new, are actually in my book, and there was no action taken. So I had the associations with the Rowlands, and I had many of these episodes of him basically insider trading. You know, I think it's got to the point where the Met cannot now fudge it any longer. They have to bring charges, investigate and bring charges against him. You're absolutely right. These are more serious in many ways than those against Mandelson, and they move pretty smartish there. We've got now, I think, more evidence about the sex trafficking, so they have two grounds on which to go after him. But I think the interesting question here is, as I say, how it's taken so long for this story to emerge. There are literally hundreds of people, most of whom didn't speak to me, who were involved in abetting Andrew in these activities, going right up, I'm afraid, to the late Queen. And I think there's some wider questions that, I mean, it's not just Andrew who should be the fall guy here, but others. It is, I mean, I noticed from your previous discussion, I mean, the elites now are finally being held to account for running things totally in their own interests. Fergie, of course, also comes out of this badly, and I think we're going to see more and more attention paid on the daughters. I've actually offered material written to the National Crime Agency, offering them to give them a list of people they should be talking to, and material that I have that isn't in the public domain, and I haven't had a reply.
And you made many freedom of information requests to the police about Andrew's activities when he was trade envoy, and every time got them knocked back. They came up with excuses not to give you the information you request. And I think that would be down, let's face it, to traditional cap-doffing royal deference. The police did not want to get involved in investigating the Queen's the King's brother and the Queen's son then. And I suspect that same impulse is pulsing through the veins of the coppers right now. They are reticent to investigate the King's brother, a member of the royal family. But I don't think they can hold off much longer, do you?
No, I mean, my requests actually mainly were to the Foreign Office and Department of Business and Trade. So, I mean, hundreds of them, which were all batted back. I only had a few to the police. But and the Foreign Office told ambassadors not to talk to me. So I mean, you know, this has been a huge cover-up. But yes, I mean, the police are now saying that the Director of Public Prosecutions are saying they will operate without fear and favour. And I think there's so much public outrage that they can't be seen to do nothing now and kick this into the long grass as they've done before.
And also, Andrew, and I think that this is something that the King has got to address as a matter of urgency. He does not seem to be understanding the urgency and the seriousness of the royal family's predicament right now, which I think is genuinely existential, thanks to Andrew. And the serious issue that the King has got to diffuse is this. We got details from the Sun newspaper last week about this £12 million that was handed by Andrew to Virginia Giuffre. God rest her soul, she took her own life subsequently. He handed her £12 million not to go to a civil court in New York to sue him civilly for allegedly sexually assaulting her on 3 different continents. He denies that. We all say, well, if you deny it and you say you never met her, why did you give her £12 million? Frankly, we don't believe you, which is the only logical conclusion to reach after that set of circumstances. But we learned from the Sun last week. The Sun said that something like 10 million was supplied by the Queen to Andrew because he didn't have the money. Some of the money was supplied by Prince Philip, and that the rest, more than £1 million, was supplied by the King. This was, or the then Prince of Wales, Prince Charles. This was denied the next day by the palace. But either way, I mean the King's or the Prince of Wales contribution, but either way, what this amounts to is because the royal family were worried about overshadowing the police's Platinum Jubilee celebrations, they handed Virginia Giuffre £12 million hush money to keep Jeffrey Epstein's sordid sex secrets. That is a dreadful look. It was a dreadful mistake by the Queen. They should never have funded Andrew. And he should never have handed her that money. And the King needs to apologise and he needs to explain. Am I right?
Well, I mean, I wrote about this in the book. I mean, the sums came, as you say, from Charles as well, though he denies it. It did. And I think the big problem he's got is that he's known about this problem for a long time and he hasn't dealt with it. In fact, they've tried to push it under the carpet, and anyone who raised it was basically either it was denied or they had legal threats or there was some strong-arm tactic used on them. So I think the big question, it's now getting to right to the heart of the monarchy, is what did he know, when did he know it, and what did they do? I mean, I've always said this is a story about financial corruption at the heart of the royal family, abetted by the monarch itself, the late Queen, and possibly by our present monarch. And I'm afraid if it does emerge that Charles knew all about it, then I think there's going to be a public outcry and he's going to have to step aside for William. I think we're getting to that stage.
So you would say then, when the King, or the King's office, very, very swiftly after the Sun broke down how that £12 million was paid to Andrew to hand to Virginia Giuffre, and it involved more than £1 million from the then Prince of Wales, now King. When he denied that, you say he's not telling the truth.
Absolutely. I have a lot more information which I will be revealing in due course about the involvement of the whole family in this.
So the King, when he denied last week that he had any involvement in this £12 million, you say was lying?
I believe so.
That's extraordinary. I mean, but as I say, yeah, it is important whether or not the King contributed, but I don't think the royal family made the most horrendous mistake by ever allowing Andrew to hand any money to poor Virginia Giuffre, because that was hush money to keep Epstein's secrets. They should never have done that, should they?
Well, they've been keeping the Epstein secrets for a long time. This was just the latest stage in that process.
And also, last point, Andrew, it's always good to talk to you. I really appreciate you coming on. Your book was full of the most explosive, extraordinary revelations. I always remember when they were first serialised in the Daily Mail, you know, devouring every word, going, my God. But you say that your lawyers kept out a lot of even worse information about what Prince Andrew and the royal family were up to. So that you believe that in terms of the bombshell revelations about Andrew and the royal family and the Epstein files, we haven't heard the worst of it or the last of it.
No. I mean, they took out, for example, all the stuff on Mandelson. I think they took out the stuff on the Islamic Bank. But there's more that I've found since. More people have come forward. I'm seeing, indeed, new people even this weekend. So I've got a lot of new material, and I think there'll be more revelations from the Epstein leaks. I mean, I've seen several things which the press still haven't picked up on.
And that you are going to do a revised edition of Entitled, The Decline and Fall of the House of York, with all this new information that's been emerging. When does that revised edition become available?
Comes out on the 21st of May, and you will be first in the queue for me to come and talk about it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrew. I demand that, and I can't wait to read it. You know, Rupert Lowe, for about, I think it's best, ever since he left Reform UK, has been making a big play of the fact I've started this movement, Restore Britain. And I've interviewed him many times. Great play. He went to great lengths. It's not a party, it's a movement. Suddenly on Friday, he changed the goalpost and says it is a party. And he said, I am today, this is what he posted on Twitter, I am today launching Restore Britain as a national political party. This was followed swiftly by Elon Musk posting, join Rupert Lowe in Restore Britain because he is the only one who will actually do it. Now, there's been a poll today, and already Rupert Lowe's party is garnering 10% of the vote, right up there on the same level as the Lib Dems immediately. I would have thought that anybody who supports Nigel Farage, or potentially the Tories, who does not want these left-wing lunatics, as in the current government, to carry on mismanaging, wrecking this country, you know, we want a right-wing government next time, or right-of-centre government, administering sensible policies as opposed to the identity politics lunacy that this lot are imposing on us. So we definitely want that, or most of us do want that. But the right is getting ever more fractured, and Rupert Lowe's party makes it even more fractured, and the more fractured it gets, the less likely it is that Reform UK will gather enough votes to be able to beat a kind of crazy mosaic of the lunatic left, run probably by Ed Miliband and Zach Polanski. Now, the idea of them winning doesn't bear thinking about, but if we're not careful, or the right are not careful, they are going to get beaten by this lefty coalition.
I think what you say is exactly right. I think British politics is splintering more broadly anyway. If you look at the left, you've got the Labour Party, you've got the Liberal Democrats, you've got the Green Party really pushing forward now, and then you've got the nationalist parties in Wales and Scotland who are very much on the left as well. So they've splintered to a great extent, but you're exactly right, the same is happening on the centre-right. And it's interesting. I hold Rupert in high regard. I've met him on a number of occasions, Rupert Lowe. I think he's a smart politician. And I think he has a lot to say. I don't agree with everything he says. You know, I don't support everything he says. But he does make a difference in British politics. And I think that is to be welcomed. It is unfortunate that he's splitting the centre-right vote. I was surprised to see him polling at 10% so soon. I think that's really interesting. But the problem he's going to have in this new political party is organisation. And you've seen that with Reform. I stood for Reform I was an early adopter to Reform before many of the other people came over to the party. I joined in January 2024 and fought the Rochdale by-election. Now, that's before Nigel Farage became leader of the party again. And the point I'm making there is that the organisation of the party in terms of on-the-ground campaigning was very limited back then in early 2024. Now, they've come on leaps and bounds by this stage. So how they're fighting the Gorton and Denton by-election, for example, is in a much more sophisticated way than it was just a couple of years ago. And so the point there is that Rupert has a long way to go with this party, Restore Britain. You know, he needs a lot of money. He needs a lot of time, a lot of volunteers to get it anywhere near being able to win votes and win elections. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. But here's the problem. there seem to be so many personality clashes on the right. Now, I don't know whether getting towards the next election, 29, 28, whenever it happens, I don't know whether or not Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch, or whoever's leading the Tory party then, will be able to forge some kind of pact. Personally, I think it's possible. But there's a real problem with Rupert Lowe and Restore Britain, and of course Ben Habib with his Advance UK party, because there's a lot of personal animosity between Nigel and those two men. Actually, Lowe and Habib get on quite well. So they've got a kind of loose affiliation, although they're not together. But they will not forge a pact with Nigel Farage or the other way around. So the danger here is, Simon, that the right still, even if there's a pact between the Tories and Reform, the right still might be too fragmented to beat the left.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I've met Ben Habib. I think he's a very articulate guy. I think he has a great contribution to make to British politics. But because of the system we have in Britain, and we'll see this play out in the Gorton and Denton by-election. So Ben Habib's party, Advance UK, has stood a candidate, Nick Buckley. Now, this is a three-way marginal. And so it's either going to be the Greens, Labour or Reform that win that by-election. And this illustrates the problem that the centre-right have got. You know, Runcorn was won by Reform, Sarah Puchin, by, I think, less than a dozen votes, by, I think, 6 votes. That was the majority that she won by. And so if Advance UK take 100, 200, 300, or even 1,000 votes in the Gorton and Denton by-election, they could stop Reform from winning that seat in the by-election, which would be a real bloody nose for Starmer. So you're exactly right. There is a real issue about splitting the vote in individual constituencies before we even get to whether a coalition should be formed in government. It is a concern, there's no doubt about that, but I don't know how it's going to be reconciled, because you're right, that these personalities, Ben Habib, Rupert Lowe, Nigel Farage, Zahir Yousaf, they don't rub along together well.
They don't, they exactly don't. And I think what we're entering now, people always said, oh, we can't, if we have proportional representation, the PR form of voting that so many European countries use, we, like them, will be doomed to eternal coalitions. I mean, that's what PR does. It means the only government you ever get is coalitions, hence France, Germany, all these countries, coalition governments. So they say, oh, PR in Britain will doom us to the same fate. Well, the thing is, even without PR, we are getting a picture emerging here that we are entering a European-style era of coalition government, that the next government will be formed either by a mosaic of the right or a mosaic of the left. So we're getting a kind of coalition system even without PR.
That's my prediction, that we will, at the next general election, end up with a coalition government, and it will either be Labour and the Liberal Democrats, or it will be the Conservatives and Reform. You made the point that the general election won't be until 2028, 2029 at the latest. That's as long as they can go. I would guess that Labour will change their leader after the May elections.
Yeah, I agree.
And then there will be immense pressure on whoever takes over to have a general election much sooner. Now, that's a problem for Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib, because they just don't have the time an opportunity to get established as political parties. They might be on the ballot paper in a good number of constituencies and take a few votes, but the momentum at this moment is really behind Reform. I mean, they've made incredible gains electorally and in the opinion polls, haven't they? They're regularly on 30%, well leading any other political party. So if the general election is sooner, then I would predict that they'll do very well in that. And I think it will be sooner rather than later. So all the momentums with Reform, irrespective of these new parties coming along. But I agree with you, we could end up with a coalition of Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage. God forbid if we end up with a coalition on the left of Ed Davey and Keir Starmer, whoever the new leader is.
I think it'd be Ed Miliband, Zach Polanski, Ed Davey. I mean, that prospect is absolutely terrifying. Let me just ask you about a couple of specific stories that have emerged in the papers today, Simon. I want to get your take on this. Is the migrant, the Filipino migrant who arrived here. We're not sure whether he arrived here either legally or illegally, but he was waiting for a decision on whether or not he could stay here forever. So he had an application for asylum in. While he was waiting for that decision, we paid, it seems, for 10,000 or tens of thousands of pounds worth of surgery to change his sex. He had a sex change surgery on the NHS, hence on the British taxpayer. He hadn't even been given the right to stay in the UK. The Home Office made the handy adjustment on his application form after his surgery to change it from Mr. to the rather old-fashioned Miss, M-I-S-S. That's just outrageous, isn't it?
It really is. I examined this issue some years ago when I was a Member of Parliament, the whole issue of health tourism that comes into Britain. And I think we would be shocked how much money is spent like this. £10,000 in this example. It was probably more in terms of all the consultations, etc. We spend millions upon millions through the NHS on health tourism. People come in here deliberately just to get free health treatment, because as an NHS we don't check on it. We don't decide or determine whether they're entitled to treatment. My wife is from Rwanda, and she came over a couple of years ago after we'd got married, and we paid a stack of money. That's the law, a stack of money into the NHS for her to be able to come to Britain. Quite rightly so, and happy to pay it. But this guy hasn't paid anything, has he? He's come here, we don't know, as you say, legally or illegally, and just gets free treatment. And I would add, he gets it via Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. That's my local hospital. And they're missing their treatment window, 18-week treatment window, for 40% of patients. So whilst others are being pushed to the back of the queue, British people, this guy is going and he's put through private healthcare, Nuffield Health treat him. That's who we're paying him to treat him. And he goes to the front of the queue. I mean, it's unbelievably bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's two-tier again. Always, migrants and asylum seekers seem to go to the top of all of our queues: housing, medicine, and so on and so forth. While this guy, gets his handy sex change operation, British people with genuine problems, medical emergencies, if you like, are waiting and waiting and waiting for their surgery. 18-month waits, 2-year waits. This guy, straight in for sex change surgery. He's not even allowed to stay here, technically. Unbelievable.
And it probably increases his chances of being able to stay.
Of course.
He'll use it as an argument, won't he?
Oh, of course. I dare say he's probably here definitely already. This is an interesting one. Anti-migrant protesters have been demonstrating outside the headquarters of the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, the RNLI, saying that they're sick of RNLI lifeboats being used effectively as a water taxi service for migrants crossing the channel illegally. They go out, collect them in the middle, pile them onto the lifeboat and bring them into Dover and Folkestone. The protesters saying, well, this isn't what people give their money to this charity for. Why aren't the Border Force doing this? Why are the RNLI doing this? Now, I think it's a difficult one. The RNLI will, of course, a fine organisation, of course, will argue, well, we have to save lives at sea. Critics will say, well, you're not really saving lives, are you? You're going out there. Most of these small boats get across fine. You're going out there and you're just picking them up and bringing them in. So it's a difficult argument, but more and more disquiet over the way the RNLI is being used. It's not that I wouldn't blame the RNLI, but it is probably fair to say it is being used by the authorities as a water taxi service, and perhaps we need to look at that.
I completely agree with you. I'm surprised that the protests haven't happened earlier, to be quite honest. If you go back 10, 20, 30 years ago, you know, you would visit the seaside and you would see the RNLI, wouldn't you? You know, ready to take action. And there was some pride in that. You used to think that that's a great service, a great charity, doing brilliant work, lots of volunteers in coastal towns, doing really important work. But just speaking as an individual, my attitude and thought processes around that charity have changed radically for this very reason. I suspect donations to this charity have reduced dramatically. It'd be interesting to see. And I also suspect that government subsidy towards the charity has probably increased because, as you point out, everybody thinks they are providing a taxi service for illegal immigrants. I mean, that's the perception, and that's what we see before us. So I'm not surprised. I am surprised that the protests haven't happened earlier, to be quite honest.
Simon, before we get to our friend Peter Mandelson, who broke cover yesterday, but he's still at the centre of a criminal investigation by the police into his alleged nefarious financial dealings with Jeffrey Epstein, the American billionaire paedophile, while he was business secretary, while he was a senior official in this government. So he's under investigation. Now, exactly the same evidence from the Epstein files is stacking up against Prince Andrew, or the former Prince Andrew, what he was up to when he was trade envoy. Plus, Gordon Brown says that he needs to be criminally investigated for his links to Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking operation. Gordon Brown saying that Jeffrey Epstein's private planes, he had more than one apparently, bought 90 flights bringing young women to Britain, some of whom were spirited off to Buckingham Palace to be with Prince Andrew, allegedly. Now, all of those allegations, so Mandelson's being investigated. Why do you think it is that with this plethora of extremely disturbing allegations against Andrew, both financial and sexual, why haven't the police launched a criminal investigation against him? They were very fast out of the tracks for Mandelson. Why not Andrew? Do you think it's just old-fashioned cap-doffing deference to the royals?
Well, I think I'm right in saying that Thames Valley Police have been investigating Andrew in relation to whether he leaked intelligence.
Yeah, but it's not a criminal investigation. Informal inquiries have been made. They announced very quickly a criminal investigation into Peter Mandelson, very quickly. And then you saw, it was last Friday week, wasn't it, boxes being pulled out of his, taken out of his Regent's Park home. So very absolute grease lightning out of the tracks about Peter Mandelson. Same evidence. In fact, there's more evidence, alleged evidence, against Andrew than there is against Mandelson. Why haven't they launched? Why haven't they announced a criminal investigation into the King's brother? Is it because he's the King's brother?
Well, you've got to ask that question, haven't you?
Yes.
That's why. That's why a lot of people in power who have a privileged position get away with lots of different crimes, and we've seen that historically over many years. So you do have to ask that question, but I think the pressure is mounting on Andrew Windsor Mountbatten, or whatever he's now calling himself. I mean, and even King Charles has come out and said we will cooperate in any way required. So I don't think it's going to go away for Andrew. More and more will come out of the Epstein files, won't it? I mean, this is the story that will keep growing. So at some stage, I would be surprised if the police aren't formally investigating it.
Yeah, I think very swiftly they've got to do this. I can only explain their lethargy or their slowness on this. The only explanation is they're a bit worried because he's a member of the royal family. As I say, if you look at the evidence, the alleged evidence against Andrew, it is much worse than the alleged evidence against Mandelson. And the evidence against Mandelson is terrible. So I think they've got to get cracking with Andrew very, very quickly. Let's talk about Mandelson, though. Yesterday's Daily Mail carrying these extraordinary stories that he took these ghost flights on board the Russian oligarch Deripaski's private jets, being whisked off to strange places to meet people before being whisked down to international conferences to do British government business. And decisions at conferences that he attended going in favour of people like Deripaski and Putin. So the suggestion is, and these flights were never recorded, the suggestion is, or the question the Mail is asking is, why was Peter Mandelson, when a government minister, when a government EU trade commissioner, why was he so close to the Kremlin?
It's a question that certainly needs answering. You're exactly right. He's being flown to Siberia, flown into the Netherlands. This is 2004, 2005, I think. He's an EU commissioner, a British EU commissioner, and he's being flown all over the place, and he's not declaring it, which he should have done. The European Union have come out and said he hasn't declared these flights. And you've got to ask, why is he being flown around by a Russian oligarch? And whose side is he on when he's taking these opportunities? It gives the impression that he's certainly not on the British people's side. It's as though he holds the British people in contempt. I mean, just put this in context. Mandelson is a very senior Labour politician. That's the reality of it. He's been around for 20, 30, 40 years around Labour. Even now, Starmer's taking advice from him. Starmer offers his Mandelson's colleague a peerage. Brown gives Mandelson a peerage. He's advising Wes Streeting, who could be the next Labour leader. This is Labour royalty. And he's been caught at the centre of a whole range of possible crimes. I mean, that's the reality of it. That's why the police are investigating him. I mean, it doesn't get worse than this. And yet you've got Starmer, who's been seen to be very close to Mandelson. He made him US ambassador. And yet we've got Mandelson in this position, and we've got Starmer criticising the Conservatives for a whole range of things when he were in opposition. Look at where we are now in terms of Labour in this Labour government.
Yeah, you were a Labour MP. You were, a member of the Labour Party around the Westminster scene for a long time. What I find strange about Mandelson, he was right at the top, right back to the Blair years. In fact, he was first employed as a press officer by Neil Kinnock. That's how far back he goes. So his tentacles are entwined in the Labour Party going back 4 or 5 decades, for a long, long time. Harriet Harman said the other day something along the lines of, well, it's always been something of a mystery that he was able to rise to the top and remain at the top for so long in the Labour Party, when we all knew from day one that Peter Mandelson was and is a bad man. How do you explain his long reign of terror, if you like, in the Labour Party? Why did so many prime ministers think that it was essential to have him right at the top doing senior cabinet minister roles or behind the scenes roles, when everybody knew there was something wrong about this guy?
I didn't know him personally, but though I'm sure I've been in the same room as him at receptions and other events and things, but I certainly didn't know him personally. But there was this mystique around him, that he was considered very capable. I think it's illustrative that you mentioned Neil Kinnock. So he worked for Kinnock, and then after Kinnock, you'll recall, it was John Smith who I did meet, and he was leader until he had the heart attack and died. And by all accounts, John Smith wouldn't have anything to do with him and cut Mandelson dry, and I think that tells you something. But, people who I do speak to say that Mandelson exceptionally intelligent, exceptionally capable, but he's quite obviously got this very strong weakness, whether it's around money, greed, his desire to be friends with people, wealthy people, whatever it is that motivates him like that. But apparently, people on all political sides of the spectrum, say that he's very capable. And that's why I think people have wanted him around. But you have to question Starmer's judgment. He'd been sacked by Blair, then brought back. He'd been sacked again. Then Gordon Brown brought him back, and then he's out of the frame again. He goes to the EU, then he's out of there, and then Starmer brings him back again, knowing that Mandelson didn't just have an association with Epstein, as Mandelson calls it. They were intimate friends. This is the top line. He was intimate friends with somebody who'd been prosecuted as a paedophile. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And yet Starmer still felt capable of appointing him to the top diplomatic job in Britain.
It's a terrible, terrible mistake, which of course Starmer has now admitted and seems to think that's okay. Well, I said sorry. I said I made a mistake. Yeah, great. Well, you can't really be Prime Minister anymore, but he doesn't seem to understand that. I want to get your take on Andrew, the former Prince Andrew. You know, my question is this. If you look at the evidence, the alleged evidence that's against him emerging from the Epstein files and now from other sources, that just like Mandelson allegedly, we've got these emails that the then Prince, when he was trade envoy, was passing on confidential British information and communique to Jeffrey Epstein, and we now know at least one other banker friend of his. I said banker. I said banker. Jonathan Rowland, who's the son of David Rowland, who had very close connections to Prince Andrew. So the allegation is that he was passing on these secrets for money. The allegation, with exactly the same evidence, is against Peter Mandelson. Now the police, within seconds, were investigating him criminally down his house, taking boxes away. There's actually more evidence stacked up against the former Prince Andrew than there is against Mandelson. Why haven't the police launched a criminal investigation into the King's brother yet? Is it because he's the King's brother?
I think it is, but not for the. But I do think it's for a slightly different reason. I think it's if they go for Andrew and they miss and they get this wrong, they've got to get it right.
I agree with that.
And I do think that if they get this wrong and he gets away with it, or he gets off on a technicality, everybody will lose their minds over it. And I think that is why this one is taking a little bit longer. Obviously, he is the King's brother, a member of the royal family. That plays a factor in it. But I do think it is more that they don't want to have the kind of, we were the ones that, you know, messed up the Andrew prosecution as a moniker for their careers. And I think that is a bigger factor. But I do think, I heard you earlier on, and I think you are right that the kind of deferential.
I think there's a bit of calf topping here, but I think you make a good point. In fairness to the police, I will accept. I think there is an element of my God, it's a royal. We can't be me ever so humble, sir. The old system, but also I think you made a good point. I think to be fair to the police, if they are going to officially announce there is a criminal investigation into the King's brother, they've got to get it exactly right. But as I say, they feel they've got it right in the case of Peter Mandelson. They've got to get it right with him as well.
All I can presume as well is that they held two very different positions at the time. So I wonder if the kind of the legal kind of marker hasn't been met in all the right ways for Andrew to be able to push on the prosecution. So that's why it's taking a little longer. I don't know, but I just presume that there's lots of little factors that I'm not a lawyer, so I presume that this is what it is. But my theory is on this that they don't want to miss. They can't miss. That's the thing.
Yeah. So fair enough, I suppose. But I think that the police this week, fairly soon, surely within 24 hours. This is the Mail on Sunday today. Now there must be a probe into Envoy Andrew. This is all about his business deals when he was trade envoy, his alleged underhand lining of his own pockets while he was supposed to be on British government duty. Also, Gordon Brown, no less, former Prime Minister, saying that Epstein's planes, he had more than one private plane apparently, made 90 flights into Britain carrying sex-trafficked women, and that Andrew was, this is the allegation, this is what Gordon Brown says, was central to that sex trafficking operation. So Andrew has got to face financial impropriety allegations and selling British secrets allegedly, and also allegations that he was part and parcel of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking operation. Very serious
allegations. And I do think this bit about the King being involved in the £12 million, I think, is a very big problem. It's disgusting. And I think it's abdication territory, if I'm being brutally honest about this, because this stench is going to stick with the royal family for a very, very long time. And I do think a kind of line drawn and will take over might be on the cards, and they'll use his illness as the excuse to take a step back from royal duties.
It was interesting. It was interesting last week. The Sun, I think it was Thursday morning, sensationally revealed something that we kind of always suspected, that the £12 million that Andrew paid to Virginia Giuffre not to go to civil courts in New York, claiming with her allegations that he sexually assaulted her on 3 different continents, allegations that he continues to deny. But he gave her 12 million quid not to talk about them at a court case, so make of that what you will. He denies her accusations. Nobody believes him, but he continues to do that. The point was, we all knew he couldn't afford that, and the assumption was he went to his mother, the Queen, and she gave. Now the Sun said, yes, indeed, that she did do this to the tune of something like 10 million. Yeah. But the rest of the money, Prince Philip, God rest his soul, kicked in some money, and that the then Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, now King Charles, chipped in, more than £1 million himself. Now, if that's the case, he immediately denied that. Interestingly, rather forcefully.
Yeah, I think he would. If
if it's true, but I, in the end, this isn't about. If the King himself chipped into this, then he has an apology to give us. But he has to apologise for this 12 million quid. Generally, the royal family paid Virginia Giuffre £12 million hush money to keep Jeffrey Epstein's sex secrets. That is a bloody bad look for the royal family.
That is bringing down the royal family territory.
Yeah,
it really is, because it is everything wrong. It's grubby, it's sleazy, it's the most disgusting crimes with the most disgusting people involved in it. It is. I don't know how the royal family will get out of this as an optics problem.
And do you know what they were saying at the time? What the general consensus was, the narrative around it was, well, we couldn't afford that case to go ahead because it's the Queen's Jubilee celebrations. Well, much as the Queen thoroughly deserved her, was it Diamond Jubilee celebrations, what a great sovereign she was, she did make mistakes, not very many, but this was a massive mistake. They should never, the royal family, handing over £12 million hush money to keep Jeffrey Epstein's secrets, just so that the Queen's Diamond Jubilee celebrations weren't affected. That's no good. The King owes us an apology.
I think he owes a big speech to the nation about a lot of this, actually, if I'm being honest.
Mentioning his damn brother.
Mentioning his...
No more of this elliptical stuff.
Oh, no.
We're worried about the victims,
what is it? We don't say anything, that kind of line. That's out the window now, because they're all implicated in it, and I think it's the only way out of it is a kind of mea culpa. This is what went on, this is everything, and that's the only way I think they can actually kind of get any kind of traction with the public again. Where, because you're seeing it all the time now, where the King is heckled, William's being heckled about it, and it's like a stench now, and unfortunately, unless they kind of clear the air properly, it's monarchy.
It's an existential problem for the royal family. They're not doing enough classically for the royals. The last time I saw them in this amount of crisis was after the death of Diana, when they seriously misgauged the mood of the public. And the public were upset, were traumatised, and the royal family just didn't really seem to pick up on that, and they had to backtrack, and they had to seriously sort the situation out. Now they're in big crisis now, and they've got to do something. They've got to start talking. They've got to start talking about Andrew. They've got to start saying sorry for this money. Quickly about Peter Mandelson. Yesterday's Daily Mail, had this extraordinary story about his ghost flights, as organised and paid for by Darek Kosky, isn't it? Deripaska, who was a Russian oligarch close to Putin. So all these flights, he was going off to mysterious destinations, and the next day going to conferences on the part of the British government, making decisions that were favourable to this oligarch.
Yeah.
Well, the suggestion is, you know, let's stress this, Peter Mandelson insists he's done nothing criminally wrong throughout all of this. But yesterday's Mail asked the question, why was this guy so close to the Kremlin?
Yes.
Yeah, the basic question is, was Mandelson a Russian spy?
Whether he was a spy or maybe an asset, I'm not sure, but I do think we have to look at the fact that a lot of dirty Russian money has flooded into London, and it is all over our, the city in general, and I do think that he has some big questions to answer. My big fear is Peter Mandelson is quite smart at times. He may not have done anything illegal. He may know where the line is and have stopped just before the legal kind of qualifier. Now, unfortunately, he does have this tendency to put his feet in it and, you know, get it, you know, up to his neck in it. But I do think on this kind of stuff, I think he knew what he was doing. And I think, maybe. But we'll have to wait to see.
Clever?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, really?
I do. Yes.
Really?
Only because I know I've heard you on this.
Clever people don't get caught.
No, they do. They do, because this for me.
How do you know?
Yeah. Well, because
how do you know?
Because for me,
there's all the clever people out there who haven't been caught. Trust me.
Well, there's a lot of people who have been caught. There's a lot of people who have been caught, but also in
clever
America,
people don't get caught.
In America, they get to pay off. Well, he's not that clever because he did get caught.
Can't even take a pee in the street.
Oh, well, I mean, I remember when we were.
Pathetic,
that was stupid. Yeah, that was the fall from grace, wasn't it, from the U.S. ambassador to getting arrested in Notting Hill? But
well, he wasn't arrested. He was photographed because he'd been for dinner with George Osborne.
Yeah, I think that's the bigger crime.
He was waiting for an Uber.
Yeah, I think that's the bigger crime.
It's the one time I felt a lot of sympathy for Peter Mandelson. Yeah, we've all been there. Where is that Dan Hoover?
Yeah,
I can't wait anymore. No, sorry.
Yeah, I do think though on some of this stuff, I think he wanted to get caught. I think he liked showing off about
that. Is a very interesting point. This is the thing about Mandelson. Arguably, he's a psychopath or a sociopath.
Yeah.
Now, sociopaths are clever. They love the idea of being grand manipulators, playing everybody, puppet masters. They love being cleverer than everybody else, but they also love sailing dangerously close to the wind, you know, really taking risks.
If you look at crimes, they also get involved in the investigations. They love to be super close to, like, the people investigating them. Like, you know, it is that kind of, I dare you to catch me. Like, they want to get caught in a way. And I think that's why Peter Mandelson, it's a lot of this
always
stuff did get
caught.
Yeah.